Okay, I'm going to convene the meeting at 6:30. We're taping. Eric?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
It's
Currently
6:30 p.m. on April 9th, 2025, special meeting of the zoning board of appeals of Greenfield. I think I said the date already, so I'll read the chair's statement. This meeting is being recorded by the zoning board of appeals. Any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20G, quote, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body. After clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceeding, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting, and if the person does not withdraw, the chair may authorize the constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. Also, I forgot to say, we're meeting tonight at the brand new fire station in Greenfield. Your tax dollars at work. Okay, so I call this to order.
Is anyone recording?
So is anyone recording? No newspaper. Okay, persons sitting tonight are
Jim Nguyen?
Peter Wozniak, David Singer, Eric Green.
Debbie Jones.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, will you read where this is a continuation of 2 hearings on the application of Verde Wireless to build a cell tower, special permit and variance application. Can you read the both in the records, please?
Application of Verde Wireless LLC for property located at 0 Fairview Street West, Assessor's Tax Map R24, Lot 7A, which is located in the General Commercial GC zoning district for a variance pursuant to section 200-8.7 of the zoning ordinance in order to allow for the construction of a new wireless communication structure of ground-based equipment, cabinets and antennas mounted on top of a monopole 170 feet in height with insufficient fall zone. That's from the first portion.
That's the variance.
An application of Verde Wireless LLC for property located at 0 Fairview Street West, Assessor's Map R24, Lot 7A, which is located in the General Commercial GC zoning district for a special permit pursuant to sections 200-4.9 C3, 200-7.14, 200-8.3, and 200-8.4 of the zoning ordinance in order to allow for the construction of a new communication structure comprised of ground-based equipment cabinets and antennas mounted on top of a monopole 170 feet in height at this location.
All right, thank you. So the way this meeting is going to be organized, the applicant is going to get a half hour to speak. And then I'm going to open this up to the public, both people that are here and people online. So I'll give people a reasonable amount of time to speak. I think the board is really interested in hearing what people have to say. And I thank the public for their patience. And I'll let the applicant begin. Please introduce yourselves for the record.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
first of all, welcome back.
Thank you.
Nice. And members of the board, Attorney Michael Rosen with George Chanis and Stephen Hubbard, who's online from Verde, and Ed Pare as counsel for AT&T, Martin Lavin, who shows up as ML on the Zoom, who's from C Squared, and Kevin Mason, who's from SAI. So one quick point of business I always ask, so forgive me for asking. The town has Mullen and you have.
I signed it. Yes, I did.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Excuse me, for the people who are listening, in order for any person who listens to a zoning matter on the panel here, in order for them to proceed to deliberation, if we miss a meeting, we have to watch the meeting and then sign an affidavit that says that we have, so that continues, that way we can continue being on the panel. So I did watch the meeting and I signed an affidavit to that effect. Last meeting, you heard Mark Maloney do the same thing. Peter Wozniak had to do that one meeting. So that's what this all means. Thank you.
Thank you. So this evening, in the half hour, we were going to cover 2 things. The first was going to be the balloon test.
Yes.
And the balloon test, obviously, as everyone saw, the weather this past weekend did not cooperate. So we also are scheduled for this coming weekend. And as we're looking at the weather, it certainly appears that the weather is not going to cooperate again. You know, I understand the saying April showers. we would like to offer a suggestion if the weekend weather does not improve. And the reason I'm offering the suggestion is I would still like to have the balloon test before the next hearing, because at the next hearing, I believe it is permitting the experts for the community group to be able to present. And I would like to have them have had the opportunity to see the balloon before they present. So what I'm going to suggest is that we do the balloon test on Thursday if we can't get it done this weekend. And what I'd like to suggest is that we do it at 2 p.m. But I would like to do the reverse order of what we've been talking about for the weekends. So when we were discussing the weekends, we were thinking we would all try and get to the site around 10. So we could observe together and answer any questions. And then if we wanted to go look at alternative view sheds to see it from different locations, we would keep the balloon up from 10 to 2 and people could do that. What I'd like to suggest on,
Are you talking about tomorrow, Thursday?
No,
a week from Thursday.
17th, this is the suggestion.
Before our next hearing. So what I was thinking was we would do the exact opposite. We'd make sure the balloon was up by 2. Any member of the community, if the opposition group council, if Attorney Campanelli was going to come into Greenfield to speak that night, they could go while it's still daylight out and see it, but also recognizing that people have jobs and have other commitments. I was thinking that we could ask and meet at the location maybe at 5:30. That would give the board members an hour to view it from a common location and ask questions if they had any, and possibly go look at other sites. And then we would commence the hearing as soon as we get back to the meeting room. And maybe that means the hearing, instead of starting at 6:30, starts at 6:45. But I'm trying to balance the ability of the abutters and the community to see it before the next meeting with the board's schedule and the time and effort that you guys are already putting in by adding extra meetings for us. So I throw that out as an option. Obviously, if that doesn't work, then the next thing we would do is we would look at a following weekend. So I throw that out there, but I felt like that was a way to give the abutters and the community group a chance to see it before the next hearing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How do members of the board feel about that?
Comfortable, yeah.
I could make
Yes.
that work, yeah.
So what time would be?
Concerned citizens? The objection to next Thursday at the balloon being put up at 2, all meeting at 5:30, and then we'll come back here for the, not here, we'll come back to City Hall for the meeting. Any objections to that? Okay, sorry, bad weather 2 weekends in a row, retry.
And just to be clear, we're not saying Saturday or Sunday this weekend is canceled yet, but my guess is we're going to know within
And we'll
24
let people,
hours.
we will let people know if it is not, we'll let people know if it's canceled without having you assume that it is canceled.
Thank you.
If you'd like, if I can.
You, McKay, just have to let me know. You are?
That's all right, I will.
Is
Thanks.
your mic, there's just a loud fan back here that's making it hard to hear. You know, we've had that we had it at the community center when we did those meetings.
I don't know if that was in the budget.
Do we know what the fan is?
Can we
and
turn
they
the
think we
fan?
can turn it
I
off?
spoke with him, he said it's not something they can,
We
it's
can-
coming from there and they can't
when
really
we
shut it
speak
off.
from this table, if you'd like, we can maybe go to the end and that way we're facing.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
A little, it's just there's
I
a
understand.
competition from the,
All right, we will talk louder. Please raise your hand if you cannot hear. That way we'll repeat what we have to say. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we had discussed addressing 2 things tonight. So the first was the balloon test. The second was there were a lot of questions about the Hampton Inn. And so with that, I'm going to hand off to Attorney Pare, and he is going to walk through that with this board. Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Edward Parry. It's P-A-R-E. I go by Ed, so please, please use that. Call me Ed. Yesterday, I sent Eric an email. I brought some copies this tonight of a letter that I put together with some attachments. I want to turn to the side so everybody can hear. So at the last hearing, there were a couple of board members were interested in the impact of using a hypothetical tower or hypothetical facility at the Hampton Inn. That seemed to be the focus of at least 2 of the board members. And I don't think one of them is here this evening, but So in looking at it, I realized, well, we could do a little bit more due diligence here, get the board some better information. So in the letter, I've explained that what we did was we provided a coverage plot. If we were to use the Hampton Inn, Hampton Inn's a 4-story building. But at the property card, it's about 11 feet per story, so it's about a 44-foot building. We typically do a rooftop mount. We do them throughout cities, other communities. We can screen it and so forth. So it gets us an antenna height, a center antenna height of about 60 feet. So this hypothetical site, I had them run a coverage plot. You'll see that's on the left-hand side of the second page, and I did provide full copies so you could see the maps themselves. And you'll see that there is a significant difference in coverage between the Hampton Inn at 60 feet and the Verity Tower proposal at 166.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. When you mean 60 feet from the ground or 60 feet up from the roof?
60 feet from the ground. So it would be basically a 15 or 20-foot installation on the roof. That would be typical of what we do for a rooftop installation. So we wouldn't be constructing a tower on the roof, but we acknowledge we do rooftop installations. We do them throughout the cities, throughout Boston. And that's generally about the height. We're probably giving it more height than we could get, but it at least represents what we could do from the roof. And you'll see the lack in coverage, the gaps that still remain open would be significant. I had Martin prepare our population count loss and area count loss. And you'll see that at the neg 83 dBm, we'd lose 3/4 of the coverage between the Hampton Inn rooftop and the Verity Tower proposal.
I have a question. When you were, I was one of the board members who questioned that, yep. So Hampton Inn, when you did the initial proposal in the map that we saw originally, it was at 166 feet. And I think, can you explain to me why the difference in height?
I'm going to, and we're going to get to the next page and I'll do that. So when you take a look at the Hampton Inn parcel, there's no way we could put a tower on. And as I told you, it was a hypothetical tower at 166 feet, but we wouldn't meet any fall zone requirements. The building takes up most of the property. And if you take a look at the property card, we would be probably somewhere between 40 feet off the property line as compared to, 90 or 100 feet as we proposed. So our ability to put a tower there and satisfy the zoning ordinance would be the same as we're dealing with here. But there is some coverage loss. I'm going to get to that on the next page. So this coverage loss is the rooftop. The reason I went to a rooftop is because that is doable. So when I said it was a hypothetical tower at 166 feet, we could actually do a rooftop somewhere around 60 feet in total, but this is the coverage we would get. And at neg 83, we'd lose about 3/4. At neg 93, we'd lose about 2/3. So that's just not something that would replace the Verity proposal. But because you asked questions about the coverage, and we had a little bit of difficulty using the map, saying, well, it's a little bit here, a little bit there, we get this neighborhood. I had Martin prepare, and you should see in the next chart. It won't be in a map, it'll be in a chart like this, third page in probably.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? I mean, I hear what you said, and I hear what's happening now, but it's just a bit frustrating to have seen that data presented as if that's real information.
What's that?
When you showed it, when we looked at the coverage that Debbie was referring to, I mean, if that's a hypothetical, it should have been pointed out and say, gee, that just shouldn't be here.
Well, we did. I mean, I said it was a hypothetical, it was a tough.
But, in the, and you said that, but when it was presented to us, it was in a report, shown as a possibility.
As a hypothetical tower at 100, it would be a 170-foot tower on that parcel if we could build it.
So if I might, so what they did for every single site is they did 166 feet. They did them all exactly the same on the theory that what you might want to look at is an apples to apples comparison. Because based on what Ed is going to explain to you next, even if we could do 166 feet, you're going to have a coverage loss compared to the Verity site. We didn't think twice about looking at each site and saying, well, what could we actually build? Would it have to be lower? After we came out of the last meeting, we obviously did that. Like by way of example, I went and I pulled all of the zoning records, the special permits, the approvals. They didn't even have adequate parking for what they have there now. They have to have, there's a condition of their special permit that they have to locate some of their parking on an adjacent site and have a permanent transferable easement and a right to park on adjacent property. So little things like that, we didn't delve into all those details because that's just spending more money and more money. But when we looked at them all at 166 feet, as Ed is going to explain, the Verity site is head and shoulders above the other sites, and he'll explain that to you now.
If you go to the next page in my letter, let me make sure I have, since I just had a recap. You go to page 4 of my letter. This would be the Hampton Inn up at the top left-hand corner. You'll see 170 feet. So this is the 170-foot hypothetical tower that we couldn't build there, but we can show the coverage and the gaps that would be produced, and you'll see that at neg 83, we'd be looking at about a 35% reduction, and somewhere between at the neg 93, somewhere between 13 and 15% reduced coverage. Now, again, that's a hypothetical tower. If it could be built there, it's not going to be built there. It can't be built there, but this was the comparison to show alternative locations. Just like when I mentioned the fairground would produce coverage. The fairground isn't in a preferred zoning district. It's not going to be permissible. Any other questions before I?
All right, so as we are beginning to focus in on the law, especially, there's two things that we have to contend with. One is if there's a significant gap in coverage, which I think you're addressing now. And the other is that this is the best site possible, the one you're proposing. So the way I understood it in the beginning, when we first came in, was that, you know, you have a duty to do due diligence around the area and try to find as many sites as you can. And then when you pick the site, you then compare them to the other sites and you advocate that this is the best site. So in my thinking about that, because you had several sites, maybe 8 to 12 sites. Are you now saying, or, and I don't want to hold up tonight's meeting, but this would be good for the next meeting to start off with. Are you saying that many of the proposed sites to kind of go through that exercise in order to get to the Verity site, that those were all, I want to know which ones of those were hypothetical and could never happen in a million years, but you were going to put up a tower at 160 feet, and this is what, you know, just like you're doing here. I'm now wondering, you know, again, I'm not saying you did it for all of them, but I didn't look at it that way. I thought that, for example, the Hampton Inn 160-foot tower was a real possibility. Yes, you're gonna have constraints with the things you're talking about. So if you think you did that in the literature, then you don't have to do anything more. You can just point it to me. But if you didn't, I'd like to know that, I'd like to hear from each site a little more about the reality or not reality, because in our making a decision, we have to factor in that it's, you know, a lot of specificity. Again, I may have missed it. I mean, there's a lot of material. I've gone over the material over and over again. You're used to it. We're not. It's hard for me to find those places where that information is. So we have to rely on your representation. So that's question one. Question two. Actually, why don't you finish that? I can remember my question. I'm young enough.
So when we came in at my first hearing, which was the last hearing.
Yeah.
I submitted a letter and I submitted 6, 8, 10 coverage maps,
Yes.
which was basically analysis of coverage that we would get from each location in a hypothetical situation. So when I say hypothetical, if you have a big lot, just blank space, a huge, you know, acreage of property, that works for us. I mean, if we have access from the public street, we can drive to it, you know, we can create a lease if we can construct it, but there is feasibility. So that the one good example is the fairgrounds. It's a large parcel, but it's in a residential zoning district, which we went through last time. Your bylaw doesn't give preference there. So the first thing, and I want to not step away from Verity, but as I said in my presentation, advocacy last time.
Yes.
we're here to provide service. So if we had a tower on the lot next door, we go and attach to the tower. Cheaper for us. It's easy to get permitted. We go and we do it. When we look at alternatives, like Verity brings us a site and says, here's what we have. We supply to the board. What else did we look at? Is there a water tank nearby? Is there a tower nearby? So in accordance with your, not a bylaw, in accordance with your zoning ordinance, we have a duty to eliminate existing structures. And I think we have that duty under federal law also to a great extent, if they're less intrusive, and to demonstrate to the board that we are picking the best location. In doing so, we supplied to the board a list of 8 or 12 alternatives we looked at. Some are, far afield. I mean, there's no way, some are up near the college. One was a town property, again, huge vacant parcel, feasible. Can we construct it? Who knows? But, I can't say we couldn't put it there, but I can come to the board and say, if I put it there, it's not as good as this one. It leaves us gaps. That was the purpose of what we did. And you should find a coverage map for each of those locations. We did go through each one of them. And the issue with the Hampton was, when you look at the maps, you really can't tell. You see green, you see some orange. And, we went back and forth about this neighborhood doesn't get coverage. This one does. This will give you a zoom in on exactly where would be lacking the coverage, population-wise, business-wise, and area-wise, streets and so forth. So it's just a back and forth of hypothetical. As I said to the board, we couldn't put 120-foot tower on the top of the roof. That's not, the building wasn't designed that way. It would look foolish. So that's the purpose of the alternatives, only to give the board evidence that we actually went out, searched the area, and we winnowed down to what we think is the best location. Not everybody agrees with us, as you'll hear.
Yeah, well, from a concerned citizen's point of view, they might think that you had a duty to find another spot, not theirs. And you're telling us that theirs is the only one you can do, or the one, it stands out so incredibly that that's the one you want to use. So
If you take a drive
that's
by,
where I'm thinking, and they're gonna now weigh in on how they think about it, but how you feel about it. But that's,
and if you take a drive by the site, which I did this evening, I would say that it is a great location, but that's my perspective. That's what I advocate for.
I understand.
Is, the variance that they're seeking is a fall zone variance. The only thing that if the tower fell over, which it won't, I mean, we build it to code so that it doesn't tip over from the base, it's a road. Nobody gets impacted. From my perspective, after doing this long, this is a really good site, but I know that we have a difference.
okay. The next question I have is this minus 83 dBm, minus 93 dBm. Can you explain to everybody who's watching? I think something I read, the 83 dBm is actually the best frequency, the negative number, lowest negative number is the best frequency. And then as you move up, it's 100 and something, maybe it's the lowest frequency, or the worst frequency.
So, and I did discuss this a little bit in my letter that I submitted yesterday. So neg 83 is the power level that we're getting from the signal. So the antenna propagates at different signals. They have different bands. We've talked about the 700 band, 1900,
1800 is better than 700?
It's not 1900.
It's the same thing.
They're all frequencies. They're all radio
The
frequencies.
narrower, the littler frequencies are the better one.
Correct. Well, they give a better footprint. So what AT&T or what all the carriers do is they use their base, like a 700, 600, whatever they've acquired from the FCC, whatever they've been licensed for, and it provides a big footprint. But the more users and the more people at the edge of that footprint start draining the system. So what they do is they use higher frequencies, which have smaller footprints. It's all backwards. So the 1900 is something that AT&T has. They'll place the 1900 on top of the 700 so that people close enough to the 19 attached to, in layman's terms, attached to the 19, and they leave the 700 alone so that 700 doesn't shrink down because everybody's using 700. So it's just a way for the carriers to layer their service. And when you get up into the real high range, like I've been doing sites now in the megahertz range, and Yeah, some of them go a quarter of a mile. So, but when you have a real concentrated area, like in the city of Boston, you start with that high frequency, you get people onto that high frequency, but because it's a small footprint, you then build with 19 and then you build with 700. So I have Martin here. There's no need for Martin to, weigh in, but if you have any technical questions, Martin Lavin is here.
I probably will, but I'm not gonna, I really want to stick to my schedule. But
Yep,
again, I think things are starting to come into focus for members of the board about, what we're listening to and the more, you gave your overview, now we're digging deeper, so.
So the neg 83 is what AT&T considers its optimal coverage. That will get us in building coverage. We propagate, if we can get neg 83, the power level out to, into the community, it's going to come through, it should penetrate buildings, vehicles, et cetera. That is the optimal coverage. And you'll see that is when you look at the coverage maps, that's what you see is green. As I said at the last meeting, we're not going to get green everywhere. No, we're not going to have neg 83 everywhere. So AT&T doesn't design to neg 83, contrary to what some people suggest. And I clarified that in my letter, but they do design to the neg 93 AT&T wide. So that's why you'll always see we'll supply plots at neg 83, which is our optimal, and then neg 93.
So 80, you do not provide 83, you provide 93.
No, we provide both 83 and 93. It's proximity to the site. So that's why you'll see closer to the site, you'll see neg 83, nice
So
green.
your phone knows to pick up the signal, is that what you're saying? Your phone is smart enough to know what signal it's gonna grab based on its.
What frequency it's gonna grab. So the neg 83 is not the frequency will be the 700 in 19.
And what's the neg, what would we call this?
This would be the power. Martin, would you refer to it as the power level? I don't.
Excuse me, that's the receive signal strength, the power received, the coverage threshold at any given frequency.
All right. Is there anything else you want to add to your presentation?
I don't. I would also just refer you to my letter with respect to some of the comments that were made. I thought there were some great comments made by the attorney that's representing some of the residents. With respect to the FCC coverage maps, the AT&T coverage maps. I put that for your information. I don't want to let things be stated out there that are incorrect, and then they become truth at some point. So I lay those out there. We agreed to keep our presentation short. We could deal with that later.
I think there's
depending on
going to
the
be
objections.
I think there's going to be questions along that line.
Yep.
But again, I want to give them, the concerned citizens, a chance, so we have the whole picture, and then we can, as the chair and the board, we can conduct the conversation because we know what people are thinking, right? As promised at 7 o'clock, I'm going to now see, now, I do want to say this to folks, you can mention this, I guess, because I know it was a concern that came up early about the frequencies and its effect on health. I just want people to know that we have no jurisdiction over that aspect of this application. Once the FCC determines the frequency level and they determine it to be safe, that's the frequency level, if I'm using the term properly. However, we would, if we were to allow this, we would condition the frequencies to remain at that level. So if people are gonna talk about, worry about health issues with frequency, I'm empathic to that. I might even feel the same way personally as you do, but it's not relevant for us. So I'm not gonna say you shouldn't say it, but don't dwell on it because it just isn't relevant. It could be part of your concerns and that's fine. So just wanted to put that out. And I'll now usually I have a sign-up sheet, but I'll take people everybody's gonna speak. We have time, so I'll take it by hand. And all right, I'm gonna let Alon start. Your name, address for the record, please.
Do you mind if I come up just so?
Absolutely not.
Because I'm not hearing you.
You can come up here and talk.
You got a chair or you prefer to stand?
So that's fine. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alana Kirschenbaum. I live at 167 South Shelburne Road in Greenfield. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here representing myself along with 22 other abutters and nearby residents of the proposed tower. Last December, we submitted a 70-page legal brief outlining the substantial case for denying the application for the 170-foot monopole tower at 112 Newton Street, also referred to as 0 Fairview Street West, I believe. I want to take this opportunity to outline various critical issues we have for continuing to oppose a tower at this location. Over the last 3 meetings, including this one tonight, Verity Wireless has presented for over 4.5 hours. In that time, they have not provided substantial information that indicates they meet the requirements for approval of the variance and special use permit. We still do not have a proven significant gap of service or the data that calibrates and verifies the applicant propagation maps that we have seen to demonstrate their accuracy. These propagating maps are just estimates with a number of influencing factors that affect their accuracy. Their information cannot be considered accurate without the drop call logs for the outlined area and the actual on-the-ground measurements that calibrates their accuracy. It is only after these things are done and this data all aligns that there can be confidence in using the model. We have been requesting this drop call data from the area since December 2nd, from the applicant since December 2nd, 2024. Here we are 4 months later and still operating without this quantifying information that demonstrates the validity of a significant gap. Dr. Chamberlain, who will be presenting next week, is an expert in propagating models, and he will be discussing the limits of the model and the needs that go along with accurate assessment in a given area. Equally important is that there are clearly demonstrated other locations where this tower can be placed away from residential homes, and these sites have not been fully explored. At the December meeting, the applicant was asked by another member of the ZBA about the criteria and methodology and process that was used for eliminating the other viable sites they were presenting. And again, we are now 4 months later without this quantifying information, as we never received these answers regarding the process that was used to evaluate. To date, we have heard a case presented by a company with a very vested business interest in its outcome. But we have not heard meaningful substantiation for the claims that have been stated in regards to the necessity of this variance. There are still many questions. One further question is the tower's construction regards to the fall zone, which is outlined in the application as a major safety hazard. We have been asked to believe that this tower, due to its design, would not be a hazard in a collapse or fire situation, again, without any quantifying data on this. The residents formally request data on how many of these specific types of cell towers with proposed hinge designs are placed across the country and their specific locations for reference. We also request substantiating data on their failure rates. We hope that you will require this information prior to your ruling on a variance and allowing a decreased fall zone. With regards to the design, is the applicant able to certify that there has never been a structural failure in any of these towers? If not, what are they basing their complete assurance that this tower will not fall outside the fall zone? Who will provide this evidence and testimony? The public is not assured with verbal assurances without specific and comprehensive data to support the claims. The unexpected in life happens all the time, and it is proper zoning that protects the safety of our residents, hence the need for our zoning and variance requirements. One question that we do have more data on is the question about first responders. Over the course of our meetings, the applicant has emphasized the need to have this tower to meet emergency call and response demand. So I discussed this issue with emergency responder leaders in the community who all confirmed that they utilize multiple technologies and are not fully reliant on AT&T's FirstNet. I spoke at length with Lieutenant Jason Haskins at the police department, Captain Alex Cooley at the fire department, and dispatch center manager Tim Cunningham at AMR, which is the medical and ambulance services, to gain a clear understanding of their emergency protocols in relation to the usage of technology and equipment. They all reported that they utilize a radio system to communicate with other emergency responders called COMERS, which stands for Commonwealth of Massachusetts Interoperable Radio System, which is now the primary communication system used by Franklin County Fire, Police, Emergency Medical Services, and their dispatchers. The technology relies on radio towers and not cell towers. In speaking with Tim Cunningham at AMR regarding their rugged handheld cell phones that utilize AT&T's FirstNet and do rely on cell towers, he stated, Greenfield has good coverage and is even excellent in places further out as the area is pretty hilly. When I asked, what percentage do you rely upon cell phones with FirstNet or the radio system in an emergency and why? He responded, it's pretty evenly distributed. The systems are redundant and one may work better than another depending on the situation. If a cell tower were to be down, it's not going to hurt us. I hope this provides some further substantiated data and clarity on that issue. For these reasons and more, the residents assert that Veridi Wireless has clearly not met the specific criteria required for variance. And you, as a ZBA, do have the right under the federal law to uphold your ordinances and variance requirements. It was very notable at our last hearing that the attorney for AT&T stated that AT&T wanted this location for their tower because it is how they want to build out their network. A member of the ZBA responded that it was not the ZBA's job to give AT&T what it wants. It is the ZBA's job to assess the need and do what is right and best for our community. The residents agree, and we hope you will take all the necessary steps needed to ensure this for our community. Thank you.
Next. Somebody want to speak from the screen? Leonore 17 has raised hand. Am I reading that properly? You were on the phone.
Yes, may I unmute?
Oh, you're good. Please state your name and address.
Yes, I am Leonora Alanis and I live at 19 Canal Street in Turner's Falls, also known as Great Falls, across the river. And I would like to speak. How much time are you giving?
I would give you I'll give you 5 minutes, but if you're just finishing, I'm not timing anybody, but.
Okay, good. I don't need that. I probably don't need quite as much. So I am very concerned about the towers, period, but more from that point of view, which you declared as being not relevant for this meeting. My concern has been for years that of health, the impact on health, and also the disfiguring of the landscape. So I am asking here, am I witnessing here that the Greenfield Zoning Board is in the process of deciding where toxic radio frequencies are visually the least offensive while they maintain their toxicity? Toxic radiation is toxic radiation wherever it covers the landscape or neighborhoods. That's why we call it coverage. Does it become less toxic when it does not offend the eye? When it does not reduce property values? There are people who will seek out today on a map, it's called the map for towers, Find Your Tower. These people will not buy property in municipalities and in areas that is peppered with towers. Rather, they choose to buy land and property where there are few towers, preferably where there is broadband. Has Greenfield considered broadband at all, such as the town of Leverett has years ago, over a decade ago? I will continue. The toxicity radiates not only humans, but the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. So I want to read something that pertains to the town of Pittsfield, where their health department has clearly established the health hazards. And I don't have it here, but it can be found, and maybe the residents of Greenfield are familiar with that case, where the residents, 17 residents, had to move out years ago. They're still not back in their homes. Talk about property value. They don't even live in their places where they pay property tax to. And Verizon was ordered by a court order to remove the tower, and they have ignored it. Also, there are thousands of studies that say that the FCC standards are completely outdated, have not been upgraded since the 1980s. With that, I finish my testimony, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Okay, I see Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
Hey
Online.
there. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, I got two different microphones. Okay, so my name is Kate Broughton, 94 Meridian Street. I live approximately 2 miles from the proposed cell tower. So even though it would not be in my backyard, I am here to support our fellow Precinct 7 neighbors and to express my opposition. But I'd also like to get some clarification regarding criteria that is stipulated in the special permits section of our zoning ordinances. Specifically, this would be section 200-60-F, and it would be paragraphs 8 and 9. So paragraph 8 says, the project shall be compatible with existing uses and other uses allowed by right, and shall not detract from the character and scale of neighboring properties. So I feel that the folks representing the cell tower project don't really know our neighborhood and really haven't taken the time to get to know it. So let's take a look at the proposed locations as it relates to character and scale. So there are 2 neighboring property clusters that would abut this tower. So the properties in group 1 comprise a tightly settled neighborhood, which shares both urban residential and suburban residential destinations. The properties in group 2 comprise a mixed commercial area with retail, dining, and service businesses, bank, gas stations, restaurants, etc., all of which fall into the general commercial designation. So now when you walk through the neighborhood portion of the abutting parcel, you will see closely situated, densely populated single-family homes. Within walking distance of these homes is a church, a Masonic lodge, 1 corporate office park, emphasis on corporate, 1 small manufacturing business, and 2 retail/service business, Tractor Supply and Premier Self-Storage. When you walk or drive through the commercial section abutting the proposed tower site, Mohawk Trail between River Street and the traffic circle, there is a mix of retail, dining, and service establishments. The way I would see it, this is the kind of general commercial mix that is in scale and in character with the abutting residential district. There is not a single structure in this entire section of Precinct 7 that is taller than 2 stories. The architectural character and the scale of the existing structures are compatible and overall convey a sense of a tightly settled urban neighborhood. So how could one possibly think that a cell tower rising 100 feet above the tree line is compatible in character and scale? Moving on, paragraph F9 states, the design of the project shall minimize the visibility of visually degrading elements and maximize the use of screening, vegetated buffer zones, and open space. Now, the section of the Mohawk Trail, which spins off of the route to I-91 traffic circle, is the gateway to Greenfield. It provides the first impression and the last impression that newcomers and regular visitors receive when they come to stay and visit our city. This important corridor leading to the heart of downtown can either set the welcoming mat or be a total turnoff. The sight of a cell tower rising 100 feet above the tree line is not going to be an asset in our efforts to attract a hotel, a conference center, or other businesses that could help generate tax revenues and enhance our community quality of life. This cell phone tower would indeed be a visually degrading element that could not be concealed by screening or vegetative buffer zones. So in conclusion, I believe in growth. I very much believe in the future of Greenfield, but I believe that Greenfield needs smart growth. I hope that you, the ZBA members, our fellow residents, will do the smart thing and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody here live that wants to speak? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Andrew Vernon, 17 Sunset Square, Greenfield, Massachusetts. I'm also an employee of Greenfield Community College. I've lived at 17 Sunset Square for 15 years, and I am also a FirstNet user. I am not myself a first responder. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a firefighter, but I do have FirstNet service for other reasons. So, cellular service needs to be improved in our community. I've lived there for 15 years. From the Rotary northeast through southeast of the roundabout, the Rotary, the cellular service needs to be improved. The best example of that, which I could offer to everyone to at least consider, is the Big Y parking lot. It is frustrating for me as a resident to see all of the other residents in Greenfield not have a service, regardless of vendor, regardless of carrier. It's not an AT&T thing. The cellular service needs to be improved. Viridi is offering a solution to that problem. I live behind Big Y. If you draw a line from Big Y to Greenfield Community College, I am squarely halfway in the middle. As I mentioned, I lived there for 15 years. The cellular services are diminished at best. Cellular service needs to improve in that geography. Cellular service also needs to be improved to Greenfield Community College as well, and in-building coverage. So I am in support of this tower for the service that it offers and provides. I can affirm as a FirstNet user that those FirstNet service is diminished throughout this 2.5 mile area along 91. So I am in support of this tower for the service that it can potentially offer and should potentially offer. I would also mention that in that area of town is Greenfield Community College, and there is a great number of not only residents, but students and employees who have cell phones who need that service to be improved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
My name is Heather Newell.
You can go. and then
Oh, I'm
you can
sorry.
go. No, that's fine. Everybody's gonna get a chance to speak. Go ahead.
My name is Heather Newell. I live at 33 Laurel Street here in Greenfield. I'm approximately 10 houses down from Buckley Nursing Home, which is pretty close to the site, and 7 from the bottom of the street. They talk about dropped calls. I would have dropped calls if I didn't have my cell phone on Wi-Fi calling. It happened. a lot. A couple of years ago, I turned on Wi-Fi calling, so now I don't get to drop calls. But if I had it on cellular service in my house, in my backyard, believe it or not, I get the railroad bed and I'm more down the street, but I do, I get drop calls right there in my kitchen. It's not pretty. I learned about this back in December on social media that this was happening. So I came to the meeting and I didn't speak in December because I wanted to listen to everybody and what everybody had to say. They talk about property values. I think I've been at my place for 29 years. I think my property value is worth less having no cell phone service than it would be with the tower. My opinion is where the tower is. I feel bad for the people who live right next door, but it is sort of a secluded place compared to where it could be with more houses around the area. I really want this cell phone tower. So I was listening in all the meetings and then all of a sudden came up the FirstNet piece. And I wasn't gonna bring up this part so much, because I wanted to keep it kind of personal and private. But I have FirstNet. I'm a public safety dispatcher. And what I'm hearing about FirstNet right now is not what I believe it to be. You can ask them this. FirstNet towers, what I understand, is supposed to be if there was a huge event, like an active shooter, God forbid, around here, where everybody's on their cell phone, everybody's on their cell phone, and it jams up the cell phone towers. What happens is only people with FirstNet, on my understanding, get to use that cell phone tower to do communications and won't let other people through. So the emergency people can get what they need. I use my personal cell phone, which has FirstNet, because I have a laptop at work. So I can hotspot it to this and get into my computer at work and have access to see just NCIC maps, building schematics, all things that first responders need to get to. Yes, you have radio, but as a dispatcher, I will tell you that the radio chatter can be so crazy during an event. Firefighters, police officers, ambulance, everything.
Don't need a cell tower.
Keep the radio quiet, because you have to listen for important things from first responders to respond to them. And a lot of stuff you do behind the scenes on cell phones. That's very important. So I couldn't keep quiet about knowing this piece. I'm not an expert, but I've done it. I was a 911 dispatcher for 11 plus years. Cars these days, connected vehicles. Back when I first started with OnStar, it was satellite. No longer. Now it's cell phone. So if you don't have that cell phone to connect to your car, it's not going to tell you if you crash, if you're in a dead zone, it's not going to send that signal. When we ping a cell phone, whether it's a person that's suicidal, that we're looking for, domestics, homeless in the woods here, they have domestics. So you ping a cell phone and you can get from the cell phone tower, from you call whatever company, you get, there's 3 sides to a tower. So the PSAPs at the 911 places, they ping off which side of the tower it is, how many meters or kilometers away, and then with an accuracy. A lot of times it's a mile away. That little place on 91 that it will include you might think, okay, I'm on the phone, it's going to drop for a second, but what is that car? There's a lot of accidents in 91. I think that's probably about it. I think it's an excellent thing. There's lots of information that first responders need. And they say, oh, this coverage is great now. I don't believe that's what FirstNet is. FirstNet is not, wow, I get coverage today. FirstNet is if the network gets jammed up, these people that have FirstNet can get that. I have 4 people on my cell phone plan. 3 of us are FirstNet people because we are first responders. State trooper, dispatcher, and then DPW worker, which also, so water, infrastructure. They all use, a lot of those people do also use FirstNet. But me personally, at my house, I don't think my property value is down. I think it's down because I don't have that. Oh, and another argument I heard before just researching arguments, they were saying how it could hurt GSET in town for internet service. On my street, we don't have GSET. We don't have the option for GSET. And the reason being is GSET says they can't get permission from the pole owners to put GSET up my way, up by the government. So that's not an option for us. So we're not hurting, she said, by using our cell phones. I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim and Beth.
My name's Elizabeth Nett. I live at 191 Fairview Street West, 5 houses down from the stop sign where Munson Street comes around, where the Robbins Church is. I've been there only for 6 years. Here's my experience. I have never had any problem with a computer or anything else, and or my cell phone. My very next door neighbor, who was in her 90s and living alone, and had her husband there until the day he passed. Wow, we had so many, I can't tell you how many times we have called on behalf of this couple, but and also my neighbor. And we continue to do that. We look in on her. We have never had a problem. Boom, bang, they're there. Wow, great. So that's my experience. I'm only telling you my experience. I'm just a resident up there. So I have walked down that street, Fairview Street West, down the hill, Tractor Supply's over here. As a matter of fact, 2 days ago, I walked down that hill. And when I walk down that hill, I look over and I look at the land. The land is low, the land is wet. The land is low, the land is wet, and it's always been that way. That to me is a scary place to try and put, now I'm not an engineer. I'm just a regular person, but to me, that's no place to erect that. Because it's not solid. It's just not a solid place. I'm not an engineer. So that's pretty scary for me. And I know exactly where the lines are now because I've seen them because I walk down the street. So I know where the lines are now. And I look down there and I go, shh. And this is 6 years of walking that street, maybe once a week. I know that. So I've had no problem. And I am not worried, and I hear everybody and I respect them, I understand them, but I have had no problem. I'm just a plain old person. I would like to see good cell service in Greenfield. I just want it in a safe place. This, for me, is not a safe place for the many reasons that have been brought up. But again, I'm probably going to be walking down there in a couple of days and I'll look at it and that scares me. So, when you take your site visit, I don't know, have you taken your site visit yet?
I think we probably have all driven by it, but next week.
Yeah, really well.
Day of the
Yeah.
balloon test is
Yeah,
also gonna be-
so that's really all I have to say. I am a commoner. And I'm scared. Thank you.
I can't see the name all the way to the left.
Right behind you, Gabe, Wales, you bet.
I mean. M&A,
Armine, yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see the R, but I was close enough. Thank you.
Yes, good, thank you. My name is Armine Margosian. I live at 186 Petty Plain Road and in Greenfield, and I've been here for almost 20 years. I think that these people who are the residents who are living in the neighborhood close by to having to be subjected to this tower, I think that, you know, if they're deciding that this is not the right location, they don't want it near their homes, I don't see why it, you know, Greenfield cannot respect their feelings about not wanting to have, for whatever reason, if it's health, safety, I mean, I think the health and safety is like number one reason not to want to have the cell tower near them. And it seems like the cell tower would be better placed like somewhere in that commercial zone, away from homes. Nobody needs to be subjected to that. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of neighborhoods in Greenfield and we're all kind of subjected, you know, it's like victimizing neighborhoods. Why are you doing that to the residents of these nice little small neighborhoods? And I think it's alienating and really not valuing the lives of the residents in these neighborhoods in Greenfield. It just seems like Greenfield doesn't appreciate their residents. So that's what I have to say. I do not support a cell tower being placed in that location. It's not a good thing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else live? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Laura Josephs and I live at 7 Conway Drive.
In Greenfield.
In Greenfield, yeah. I came a little bit late, so I don't know if this has been brought up already, but I have a child who's gonna attend the Newton Elementary School. So that's one of my concerns because of the proximity of the tower to the elementary school. Kind of especially where the kids play outside at recess. So like a health concern in terms of the radiation from the cell tower. Also concerned about property values and definitely what Armine was just saying, just empathy with the people who live so close to the tower who feel like they're not being heard and respected. And if there's a more appropriate site that would spare really close residences from having to deal with the impact of such a big tower.
Okay, that's. Okay.
I can get two on the board.
Yeah, I would just like to say that the zoning board is absolutely dedicated to the health and safety of Greenfield residents. So I don't want anyone to doubt that that's the case. But there is a federal law that has jurisdiction over this matter, which means that we have to look at what's happening under the rules of that statute, along with the rules that are local. So while it may seem like an ordinary situation where the board can just say, well, the residents don't want it, so let's figure out how to make that happen. That's not how this works. So we have another meeting next week, and it behooves everyone to understand how the law works, even in layman's terms. And if you can address the factors that are part of the law, that would go a long way towards helping the board understand how to balance your interests and the applicant's interests. But so basically, they have to prove there's a significant gap in coverage because the Federal Communications Act was enacted to set up a nationwide system of cell towers, understanding that people probably wouldn't want these ugly things in their neighborhoods. And so they set it up so that there's a balance between the federal law and the state law. And we're going to have to achieve balance when we make the decision. So I just want people to know that we're very empathic. We understand what you're saying, but only telling us that we shouldn't do it because you don't want it there isn't really how we can move along with this application. So whether there's a significant gap in coverage and you could tell us why you think they haven't proven that, that's fine, that's fair game. And if there is a significant gap in coverage, then is this the best location? And by us not allowing this location, we're effectively prohibiting a tower to be placed in a place that will provide what's needed to prevent a significant gap in coverage. So I just want you to know that we're very sympathetic and we're all residents here. We understand what you're saying, but our duty is not to go down that path in determining what to do next. So thank you for sharing those feelings. And if people want to continue to share those feelings, that's fine. I'm open to it. I will not interrupt you. But that is not the test that we need to administer to this situation. We are a quasi judicial body that needs to respond to the law and the facts. So again, there's another meeting next Thursday. The kinds of things we need to hear are significant gap in coverage. Is there really one? And is this the best location so that there's no other location that could provide this kind of service, and therefore our actions would be prohibiting the use of the telecommunications in this area. So just understand that we're part of your community, that that's our job.
Okay, we have two more hands.
Sure, I can't. Natalie?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Godelia Richard and I live in Charlemont. So I'm not going to be close to the towers, but I just wanted to give my support to the community who didn't want this tower built next to their houses, because I became very ill because of electromagnetic pollution, and I know that maybe there's a law saying that we can't stop a tower because of that, but still we are humans, and it's very important that we talk about this subject and that people are allowed to express themselves, because it's very serious subject. And anyways, they have to change this law because it's totally inhuman and totally kind of like unlawful law. So we have to express ourselves about that. And I guess, yes, I just wanted to give my support of, even though I live far away, because I know that people can be affected by this tower.
Are you finished? Thank you. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jonathan Mirren, 224 Averbrook Road in Charlemont. So at the last meeting, Attorney Campanelli really outlined in detail why these coverage maps being provided by AT&T were not sufficient to prove a gap in coverage. As Ms. Kirschenbaum said, the residents have been asking for drop call data to prove a gap in coverage since December 4th. And, I'm happy to get into a little bit of a back and forth with, because I really hear you, Mr. Chair, that you need to decide based on your zoning bylaws. But I would implore you and the board at this point to simply demand, given, that residents have scraped together attorney's fees, AT&T didn't necessarily have to scrape together attorney's fees, they just had them available, and submitted a comprehensive legal brief with 23 signatures demonstrating that there's not a significant gap in coverage. Unfortunately, I'm not with you in person right now. I'm looking at the AT&T coverage map. They're advertising to potential customers. There's no gap in coverage in this area on their coverage map. In fact, most of it says 5G plus. Which gets back to, Mr. Vernon's point about wanting improved coverage. And I believe Mr. Vernon also spoke at the previous meeting. And while I completely respect his views, it's not the board's job to allow or support AT&T's goal to provide, if the goal is to provide streaming video, but actually the goal is really to have sufficient coverage to stream 2 movies at the same time, 3 movies at the same time, 4 movies at the same time. What is the endpoint? Actually, the law just requires you to make sure, to make sure that a call is not dropped. That's the extent of your responsibility. A call, a phone call. Not to compete with GSET, not to compete with Elon Musk, just to make a call. So according to AT&T's coverage map, they have full coverage in this area. And in terms of safety, copper landlines, AT&T is busy advocating for the stripping away of basically neglecting and removing residents' abilities in states around the country to use their copper landlines, which are in fact the best safety net when it comes to emergencies. If there's an earthquake, the cell tower, is going to go down way before the copper landlines. So lastly, I'd like to close by saying that I've run a theater company up here with my wife called PT Theater Company since we first started offering. Our first performance was at Greenfield Middle School in 2008. And we've been serving the Greenfield Public Schools in different ways with performances and residencies. We were part of the early B-Fests, have continued to be involved in B-Fest over the years. We created Dino Fest with Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association. I'm personally, and our company is deeply invested in Greenfield and in the character of Greenfield. And as Ms. Broughton pointed out, this is basically putting a 170-foot cell tower as the greeting to Greenfield. Greenfield's at a critical moment where there's an opportunity to kind of capture this, you call it a brand. I mean, this identity as a safe place, a sanctuary city, if you will, and a city that supports pollinators and has this deep natural history connection with dinosaurs. There's all kinds of amazing ways that Greenfield can continue to reinvent itself. Having a 170-foot cell tower is not in that what I see or what seems to be when I connect with people who live in Greenfield, that's how they want the image, sort of a welcoming beacon of the town to be. So in terms of your bylaws, they refer to character, and this is clearly not there. And very last thing is that, we've gone door to door and talked to the people who live right on that street along between the tower and Tractor Supply. Some of them have written in, some of them showed up, some have not. I really, maybe during the balloon test, I just, I think you'd be welcome to knock on a few doors. You'll find people who are just, like many people, just struggling to survive, a single dad with 2 kids, a guy struggling with cancer, just people who are not necessarily, maybe some people who don't trust that our public institutions still function on their behalf. I just encourage you to meet those people and talk to them, see what they think about a 170-foot tower decreasing their property value that they put their whole lives, their whole savings into creating some health, some wealth for themselves here in Greenfield. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, John. Anybody else want to speak? Yes. Yeah. You want to speak?
If you want me to.
Yeah, I think it's important for the fire chief to speak, please.
Okay. If I can, I'll come up there. Cheers, Chief, you're Dan.
Now, Chief, I think you live in Greenfield, correct?
I do, my entire life.
Okay. Are you speaking as a resident or speaking as the chief?
So I have been asked to speak as the Chief and the Emergency Management Director for the city of Greenfield to give the perspective from our point of view based on facts. I sit here really, really uncomfortable because what I'm going to say goes against the people that I've sworn to protect in their feelings about this particular issue. And I try not to get involved in any type of a political one way or another. But I have been asked to speak on behalf of facts and facts that I know as the Emergency Management Director and as the Fire Chief. And I will say it in a broad sense, not specific in support or non-support for this project or any project. I will just tell you my perspective as the Emergency Management Director and your Fire Chief. I will tell you that the cell coverage in this town is in very much need of improvement. We have been working with FirstNet for a decade. And when we originally went to FirstNet, we identified certain areas of town that we have very poor coverage. Poor coverage meaning that calls get dropped, people are unable to make calls. They may be able to make a call, but it's dropped. I can tell you that happens. I can tell you that I've experienced that on multiple emergencies. The areas we've identified is the Route 2 Rotary in 91 and the areas surrounding that. We've identified areas in the north end of town, and we've identified areas within the center of the city. Places that you would think that you would not worry about coverage, yet we have challenges with coverage. There was comments made where the emergency services have been brought up in regards to our communication. And yes, we have gone to a very robust statewide emergency system for our radio system, which has improved our coverage over our old systems. We still have penetration issues in buildings with this system. We've had to buy in-vehicle repeaters to penetrate. But our system overall is very good and very robust. That's not the future of emergency communications. The future of emergency communications, whether we like it or not, is this. We have just implemented over the FirstNet program, because we do have coverage issues with our radios, a system where our radio is built into our phone. So I can bring my phone up right now and I can click on a button and talk on our radio system to our dispatch without having a radio physically in my hand. That's the future of emergency communications. The other future of emergency communications for us is the ability for enhanced 911. We've upgraded our 911 system where shortly, if somebody sees a crime, if somebody sees a fire, if somebody sees something with their cell phone, they can FaceTime, they can video in live time to the dispatcher what's going on. All our emergency trucks rely heavily on cell coverage. Our mobile data terminals within the trucks, which tells us mapping, which tells us information that we need, is all on cell coverage. And I will tell you, there's areas of town where that just doesn't work. It works in the firehouse because we built out the systems that when the call comes in, it captures that data. So when we go to areas that aren't covered, that data is built into that device and won't drop it. But if we're in an area that doesn't have the greatest coverage, we have limited ability for that. I will tell you my personal experience of what happens when cell towers don't work. During Irene, before there was a mandate that cell towers in nationwide, they didn't need generator backup, power backup. We lost our main tower. We had one at the time on the Country Club, which is a 200-foot tower. We lost that tower, and communications during that event for 2 days, going on 3 days, was very challenging, trying to get emergency information to the feds, to the state, and to our emergency partners. That has since been corrected. And since that has been corrected, the power losses we've had community-wise, we have not lost our cell coverage. We have a reverse 911 system. We've captured a lot of data from the landline systems within the city because that's public record. Cell phones are not public record, but the landlines are public record. And we are able to get out emergency notification. I will tell you, the majority of people, especially young families, especially younger folks, don't have landlines anymore and rely very heavily on their cell coverage use. So as we talk about communications and whatnot, cell service, whether we like it or not, is not going anywhere and is not going to be replaced. And we need to be able to, in my opinion, and I mean no disrespect to anybody else that feels differently than I do, we need to take care of people that don't have the access to a good cell network. Now, I don't know if that's this site or a different site or whatever. That's not my place. I've looked at the coverage. I'm thrilled with the coverage increases that this provide, but that's not my place. I'm just saying that we have areas of town where people have challenges getting on and making phone calls. And I think we need to just be aware that that does happen in this community. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I will tell you another experience that I have. I travel across the country and I've assisted at major emergencies, hurricanes and whatnot. I will tell you my trip to Puerto Rico, the number one issue that they had was the lack of cell power, so people could use their cell coverage to talk to their family members. And so by the droves, by thousands, people would go to their local community mall to get power to power just their cell phone. The cell phones are a critical part of communication for everybody in an emergency, to the point where emergency planners throughout the country, small towns to large towns, your cell coverage, your cell towers or whatnot is one of the top priorities for critical infrastructure in a community to protect. So I just throw that out. I hope it's, again, you know, it's uncomfortable because like, I know there's strong feelings against that and I'm not trying to speak either way. I'm just trying to give you the perspective from the emergency side of my 30 years in emergency services.
Anybody have any questions? Chief, anybody have any questions for the chief? I have a question. So, it sounds, so FirstNet is a distinct service. Not the same as me having AT&T service and calling people, correct?
So FirstNet is a federal program that came out of September 11th, 2001. What they found was when the towers collapsed and chaos was everywhere in lower Manhattan, everybody got on their cell phone and overloaded the cell phone networks. And the people that needed it the most was the first responders, and they could not make telephone calls because the network was inundated. That's happened here in our community in smaller emergencies like Irene had. But because of that, the federal government came out and took away the old push to talk and reclassified it and made it a different and then mandated the federal government mandated that they provide a network for first responders, and AT&T got the contract to do that. What it basically does is that the way that it was explained to me years ago was consider the cell coverage like a highway, right? And you've got different levels of cars on the highway. And when there's an emergency, that highway fills up, but your emergency traffic needs to get through. And so what it does is that it takes the emergency responders traffic and makes it the priority, puts it in the fast lane so that they are the ones that the cell phone, everybody else, all the other cell carriers get prioritized less than the first responders, because it was a real problem in Manhattan when the first responders couldn't talk. One of the reasons why they couldn't talk is because their main communication towers for FDNY and NYPD were on top of the tower. And when the first tower fell, it took their communications. So all they had was cell phones and nobody could make a phone call. So FirstNet was put in, mandated by the federal government to say, when the system fills up, we've got to get our first responders priority traffic. And that's why it is. Now, AT&T got the contract to facilitate that, but FirstNet is a mandate from the federal government. You can correct me if I'm off base there, but that's my understanding of it.
So at minimum is if FirstNet is satisfied by this tower going up, you're satisfied? In other words, we don't have to go beyond everybody having coverage, different companies having ability to put space on this tower, people having regular coverage. That's your priority is if there's a FirstNet access from this tower to help with the Rotary and the center of town, that would satisfy what you want as the fire chief.
So
You may have personal.
So I'm gonna tell you that the federal government is the one that has mandated the coverage for first responders, including their goal is to have full cellular coverage no matter where you go, which has been as challenging as it is here having that conversation. It's been very challenging up in the hill towns to have that conversation. Yet FirstNet, my understanding from my education that I took years and years ago as they spun FirstNet out before AT&T even got the contract for that, was that that was the goal, to provide communications for your first responders regardless of where you are. I did happen to notice, driving today, coming home from work, I noticed, the 200-foot tower that's at the country club. And then if you look north, there's another 200-foot tower. And if you look to the east on Route 2, there's unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever way you want to look at it, the cell towers, that's in order for us to have the coverage that we need to have the cell towers. I am sure that people had the same conversation when the first utility poles went up. And I don't mean to minimize that, but the world now, whether we like it or not, runs on cell. And the capacity, not just the ability to make a phone call, is important. That's not the only importance now when it comes to cell phone. Most places are ditching anything wire. And in emergencies, provided the pole is up and the power's on, which is where the generators on, the cell phones don't go down. I will tell you, we've lost whole neighborhoods when a tree takes down a power line and takes the wired line down. We've had it happen in, the Burnham Heights, where they lost telephone for the whole neighborhood for 3 days because a tree took down and it took a while to get the wires back up. I only say that from a factual standpoint. I don't say that as an opinion standpoint. And if it's coming across like it's my opinion, I apologize for that. But that's the world we live in. And I'm telling you, the majority of people have access to cell phones. I don't know anybody, including my mom and my dad, and that don't have cell phones. And if you're going to have cell phones and you build out the capacity of the cell phones, whether it's internet, whether it's TV or whatever, sometimes there's necessary evils that go with that. Okay.
So, any questions? All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak? Anybody else want to speak again? Yeah. Oh. That's us.
So John has his hand up again.
Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I just want to circle back, especially after the chief's statements, and I want to thank him for sharing that point of view. Given that this decision is really seems to rest on the crux of, is there a gap in coverage or not? And there's evidence to suggest that there is no, and then there's AT&T's map, and then there's anecdotal evidence. So given that this is such a critical question in this, for you, the board, would the board endeavor to consider at this moment to require dropped call data so that it's just definitively settled and you're not going on my opinion or the chief's opinion or their map or our map or whoever's map? Just settle it and require, would you please consider asking them to provide drop call data for Thursday's meeting?
Thank you, John. Judy? Judy?
Yep, can you see me? Yep. I
can
just
see
have
you.
oh, sorry, Judy Shear, 73 Munson Street, Greenfield.
Yes.
My question is, how will people be notified when the balloon test will be? Will it be Thursday? Will it be on the weekend? How will you let people know when it will be?
Well, Alana is my contact person. I'll let her know.
The April 17th.
So if she will know whether it's canceled or not, and then you can connect, she'll send out however you're communicating with her, she'll communicate with you. If you're not, if you're independent of the concern group that has submitted the brief, and is this a woman that's part of the concerned group?
What is her name?
My name is Judy Shear, but how will other neighbors who have not been involved, how will they know? How will other people in Greenfield know?
The only way that they would know is if we on the calendar, we posted the balloon test.
The
So like
Greenfield
any
calendar?
meeting, with that,
Sorry, the Greenfield calendar, the town calendar?
yeah, the town has a calendar which tells you every day what's going on in officially in town. Since a number of us, ZBA members might be there, I think it could be considered an open meeting. So it will be posted on the city calendar.
Oh,
And the last weekend was posted on the city calendar. It's been changed to this weekend. And if this weekend doesn't happen, it'll be changed again. It may cause inconvenience if somebody comes and it's not happening, but it will be posted for the 17th at 2 o'clock.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, go ahead. Do you want to speak again?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to add, again, Heather Newell, 33 Laurel Street. The fire chief is talking about the trees going down, the wires going down. I have Comcast for my Wi-Fi. So if something like that happened or we lost power, I no longer have a landline. I got rid of it because Comcast started, it used to be a discount to keep that landline, whether you wanted to use it or not. Now they charge you more for it. So I finally just got rid of my landline. So it's just this. So if my Wi-Fi goes out, I've dropped calls, and on that map, it shows white right now for me.
Yeah.
I'm not worried.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that,
Thank you.
I don't know if it would be show up as drop calls because I'm on Wi-Fi and it doesn't get dropped right now.
Go ahead. Say again your name.
Andrew Vernon,
Andrew,
17 Sunset Square, Greenfield,
Yeah.
Mass. So I just wanted to. So there were some comments made about GSET. I think it's terribly important that this is for an application for a cell phone, a cellular tower. This has nothing to do with GSET or alternative means of connectivity or phone calls. This is purely an application for a cell phone tower. So it's the alternative methods of things like Wi-Fi calling is not what we should be discussing here. We should be discussing the facts of the cellular tower being made available and the service that it offers, not the alternatives of things like Wi-Fi calling, or copper lines of any carrier, AT&T or otherwise. This should only be a discussion of the cellular tower and cellular communications, not of alternatives. It's frustrating to hear that we should talk about those alternatives. We're only talking about a cell phone tower.
Okay, thank you. Chief, if I didn't say it, thank you for speaking. I jumped right to the next person and thank you very much. Mr. Chair, yeah. Can that screen be made to, you're not that.
Hi, I'm unmuting. My name, it's under Safe Tech Forward because your Zoom setup doesn't allow for people to rename. So it's something in your settings when you do these meetings, you have to allow the speakers to rename, and it's not allowing for renaming.
All right, Safe Tech, go for it.
My name is Pam Wallace, and I am actually one of the directors of the Environmental Health Trust, and I've been a part of these meetings, and I'm a close colleague of Dr. Chamberlain's, who's going to be speaking next week. And the reason that I wanted to speak was just quickly that I do these hearings all over the country and have for a number of years. And one of the things that I think we want to differentiate when you're talking about, variance and what meets the requirements, we're not having a discussion about whether Greenfield has a adequate self-coverage tonight completely. We're having a conversation about whether, a very site-specific conversation, whether this site meets the criteria, and what the applicant put forth was, did he meet the criteria, she meet the criteria for saying that they have, they have the need for this variance. We're also, again, FirstNet is not reliant on this tower site specific. There can be other places in the community, maybe industrial areas, other sites that fulfill this. there can be things like small cells and repeaters and other things that can be put into place at the community college in these areas to fulfill this. So I think the criteria that you guys are discussing is, does this site meet the specifications needed to grant this variance? Not, is this going to be the holy grail of cell coverage in Greenfield? So making those distinctions, just like we're making those distinctions about health and safety, I think is quite important. You may have some issues, and just like Jonathan mentioned, if you do, it would make sense to do the full gold standard analysis of the community and see exactly where those gaps of services are. Again, beyond the propagating maps that are just estimates, do the deep dives, do the quantifying pieces, and find out and assess where your needs are, and then fulfill them. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with this site-specific question. So thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Is it required that every city use FirstNet? I know there are other carriers that offer first responder networks, and as far as I know, I mean, they have options. I don't think it's mandated that they have to use it. I mean, they probably choose to, but that's fine.
You don't have to use it. I mean, it's a service provided through AT&T.
You could, government is, your representation is the government wants that service, has the right to make that service available.
The government mandates the service be available, whether municipalities subscribe to it or not, is a different story. Right.
Does that help? Anybody else? Okay, if somebody else, tonight is, are you gonna be a citizen?
No, I have a question, actually. GSET, I've heard that
Yeah, you want to know?
mentioned a few times. I don't know what that is. I mean, we just tried to Google it here, but
Greenfield Community TV, internet and TV.
So under the state law where you're allowed to have your own,
Run by the
what's your broadband?
Yeah.
own service.
Thank you.
GCET, that might help you find it.
GCET, okay. Yeah, I was looking GST.
GSET.
Sorry,
GCET.
Greenfield Community Energy Technology.
I'd like to use it if board members have questions of the applicant, this might be a good time to go through that. I'll let others start, but I certainly have some questions.
I guess I'd like to start, David. The variance tier for the fall zone, is that correct?
And the height.
Yeah, I'm just saying the height is because they can't meet the height restriction for a fall zone. They're here for a variance.
Correct.
Okay. You have proposed cell tower that has a mechanism that has been engineered and validated as being correct.
Correct.
Safe, so that
Correct.
technically, if that's the case, then you are now adhering to the requirement for satisfying the technicality. I'm trying to separate all the conversation about the coverage, because I think that similar conversation is going to take place when we go to talk about the special permit.
Certainly, I mean, one of the thoughts that I've had since the last meeting was we are definitely focused on the federal law and its application to granting relief. But the truth of the matter is, you might actually be able to make a decision based on 40A alone and put the federal law aside on the basis that you have a land that's uniquely shaped. So when you look at the soil, the shape and the topography of the site, it slopes downhill, it's wetlands, it's not going to be put into a productive use because of its location and the condition of the soil. So one could argue that a variance might be appropriate on the basis that, well, we do need a height variance. We're taking advantage of the slope. We're taking an advantage of a limited use lot, and we're going to put it into a productive use by designing something that needs relief, but it can be granted in such a way that it's not more detrimental than if we didn't have the relief, i.e. we're designing it based on solid engineering that was peer reviewed.
See, I'm trying to look at it as an engineer.
Yeah, well, yes, and I appreciate it. Somebody earlier had said, No facts were presented, no data was presented, and I think that actually wasn't correct. In fact, I think I remember handing you the technical data at the last meeting, and that technical data was shared with the city's peer consultants, and the peer consultants actually confirmed. So there was, like somebody mentioned, there was no data, there was no review of it, that it was just our representation that it works. And like, sometimes what people say becomes the truth. At the end of the day, we are trying to design a site that would satisfy this board that,
The reason I bring that up, excuse me for interrupting, you presented a number of other hypothetical cases.
Yes.
And you just ruled out. I mean, because the one at the fairgrounds, it was ruled out because you feel, because it's in a neighborhood, that can't happen. Well, technically in the ordinance, it does allow that. It's probably not a preferred one. And we probably would have as much of an outcry from the public about putting it there, but that still is a possibility to put it there and meet the fall zone requirement. You know, I mean, I'm trying to somehow, for me, I'm trying to separate the engineering and technical requirement for the construction of the pole where it's proposing it. Yep. And then look at all the other issues about coverage, drop calls and all that kind of stuff, because if in fact that technicality gets met, then without considering those other opportunities, this is the only site that you're saying works.
correct. Well, no, we're saying, and I think this is something we actually agree with, some statements in Attorney Campanelli's memorandum, which is we believe that it is the least intrusive site. And so when you look at the fairgrounds, so number one, I don't believe that it's a lower rank zone. I believe it's not an acceptable zone.
Well, as I read the ordinance, it's the fourth one. It doesn't, I don't think it prohibits it.
Okay, so the second thing is, I don't think it's less intrusive because there are more residences within a closer proximity, and there were more residences. No, so I'm explaining the logic to how we would get. So it is a balancing of the different factors and criteria.
What would be the balancing process to that? I mean,
Our years of experience doing this. I mean, I don't in any way mean to be disrespectful, because you might have different opinions than we do, but Ed's been doing this since the long past. And we've gone into communities. I've probably done 200, you've probably done 1,000. We hear what communities have to say. Keep them away from residential neighborhoods. Design them in a way that they can accommodate co-location. Always look and see if you have an available existing tower first. Take into consideration whether or not you can find a location that is less impactful than other locations. So in this one, you know, by the time I was involved, I think they had already looked at 12 or 13 or 14 sites. And I looked at this one immediately and I'm like, it's immediately adjacent to the highway. It's on a lot of land that can't be used for anything else. It sits 20+ feet below the road. So even though you have a fall zone issue, you're here. Could an individual make an argument that a different site is the least intrusive site? Yeah, absolutely somebody could. And somebody could say that, well, the neighbors in the fairground, they would much rather have the cell tower over there. That's less intrusive because they're not upset about having it, whereas the people on Fairview West and on Newton Street are upset about it, and they think it would be more impactful to their property values. There's some objective criteria that goes into this, and there's some subjective criteria that goes into it, and it's kind of a blend of both.
And I respect everything about your credentials. Don't get me wrong.
No,
but we're going to have an expert come in and give us a different presentation.
Correct.
And I want to be able to at some point step back and say, I heard what you say, and I'm heard what they're saying. I'm going to try to evaluate which of the information I receive I'm going to feel comfortable ultimately making a decision.
So my opinion would be as follows. Think less about what the lawyers are saying and think more about the facts that are put in front of you. As the lawyer, my job is to paint the picture for you, but I am not creating the colors. That's why C² is involved. That's why SAI is involved. That's why Valmont is involved. We actually have engineers that are going out and testing and designing. We have engineers that are designing the pole in the fall zone. I'm the painter, but I'm given the tools and the supplies. As the lawyer, I am responsible to present all of those to you. But I do think, and again, I'll go back to the point I mentioned earlier. Somebody said that we've never given you any facts with regard to the structure, but that's what somebody can say, and I can sit here and say, well, I did give you facts. At the end of the day, you have to sit here and say, who's correct? Did someone give us facts or didn't someone give us facts? I know you know we gave you facts because I handed it to you at the last meeting. It's going to be the same thing next Thursday night, and it's going to be the same thing when we rebut in 4 weeks. If we rebut on something and we're not backing it with Martin Lavin or we lost Kevin or Kevin Mason, if we don't have somebody on our team supporting that, we gave you a written appraisal analysis. Did the abutters go out and get a written appraisal analysis? So yeah, for lack of a better term, I'm the mouthpiece as the lawyer. But everything I'm telling you, I'm basing it on reports that I'm handing it to you. And my hope is that at the end of the day, you hear everything everyone says, including the abutters, including the fire chief, including all the lawyers. But at the end of the day, I do think the law comes down to a decision has to be made based on facts of record. So my opinion, and again, I like the way the fire chief said it, he's not giving you his opinions. He doesn't want to be up here giving you his opinions, but he's trying to give you factual information. My job is to try and do the same thing. And if I do speak and you think it's just my opinion, say, well, isn't that just your opinion? Where's the facts that support it? And it would be my job to get you those facts that support it.
Could I just add? I'm sorry. No, I defer.
Question. I know in some communities, they were required to make it look like a pine tree. Make it blend in. They have a couple down along Route 2. Was that to satisfy the community so it wouldn't stand out like a sore thumb? Or?
I think early on when cell towers first were starting to be proliferated, the big buzzword was stealth. Okay, it was all about doing it stealth, trying to make it look like it was something other than a cell tower. And then at the end of the day, people realized it's far more natural to drive down the street and see a telephone pole with wires on it and see a cell tower than see this thing that looks like an upside down toilet brush that's of a color that looks like an upside down toilet brush. So, but when you talk about like things in the city and putting them on the roofs of buildings, yeah, I'd be happy to drive you around Boston one day and I'll point out elevator shafts that actually are cell towers. Fire stations are phenomenal cell towers. Do you know why? They had to hang their hoses to dry. So the height of the towers connected to firehouses held the hoses. They can hold the cables and you can stealth and you can put them in. One of the things, so I represented Nextel back when Nextel was a carrier. When they merged with Sprint, the attorney for Sprint continued that work and I did not. One of the things that I picked up along the way, because I had done one for Nextel, was churches. And the next thing you know, I'm getting calls from different churches. You'd be surprised to know how many church steeples have cell towers in them. Again, more densely packed areas where you're trying only to get a signal a half a mile, but you got something that's 75 feet. You take the panels off, you put in stealth installations, you put radio frequency transparent materials, and you rebuild the church steeples. So there are lots of different ways to do them when you're in a densely populated area. But as you said, when you're out on Route 2 and you drive by it, you're looking at a toilet brush, not a cell tower. I personally, again, opinion, not fact, I'd rather know there's a cell tower there.
Ed, you have something to add?
I would just, to go to your point, I mean, we talk a lot about the federal law and those standards, whether we have a significant gap or not. But there is a step first, that's your zoning ordinance. So you do have to run this through that sausage grinder to say, I mean, when I look at the zoning ordinance, I just try to follow the rules. So if you say, you can't imagine how many times you've heard, I hear, why are you putting it in this residential area? There's a highway right over here. You can place it next to there. That's where all of the carriers went. It was easy to do. It was right along the traffic area. So we try to follow the rules as you lay them out in writing. We follow the law. We respect the law. So we have a site, which from our perspective is a good site, except your bylaw says, go into the industrial areas, go into the commercial areas. First and foremost, find communication towers if they're there. So that's why that scrub is done. But before we get to gap, least intrusive, run it through your zoning ordinance first. And I know variances are, zoning boards always struggle with variances. They're very difficult standard to meet. But in this instance, you do have topography issues, you do have wetlands issues. And your fall zone is difficult on any property. I mean, if we go over to the Hampton Inn, if you take a look at that parcel, we'd need more of a variance, or they would need more of a variance if we use that. The fairgrounds is in a zoning district that the ordinance doesn't prefer it. We don't come in and say, well, let's take something they don't prefer and try to force that, you know, through some kind of special permit. They want us in the commercial district. So, you know, like the fire chief mentioned, I'm sure the first few telephone poles, people weren't terribly happy with. I'm sure the first few transformers, people were very upset with. And then when you look at the conglomeration of wires and some of the hornet's nest, I mean, we're dealing with that with some of the small cell stuff that we do in the municipalities where we're really dense. We have a tower or a cell phone site nearby, and we're placing something on a telephone pole and we get opposition to it. So it's really, we're trying to follow your ordinance. You say we want it in the commercial areas. A lot of municipalities do. Some prefer large lots and they put in their zoning ordinance, go find a 5-acre lot if you can. We don't care if it's cleared. We don't, these are our preferences. So we try to follow, we respect the preferences. That's why we're at a site that's in the commercial area. As I said, I drove by the site. I understand there's some houses along the way, further away, but there is commercial development there. We're right across from a tractor supply business. And the land's not terribly useful. I mean, it's right along an interstate highway, which is key for us when we have a gap there.
I also think,
Let me just finish. I would also distinguish between argument and evidence. So you're going to hear next week lots of argument. Listen for facts, listen for evidence. That's what you base your decision on, not whether some lawyer tells you, here's how you should do it. You should say, well, what are the facts? What evidence do we have to support those contentions, those arguments? I think if you look at our application, we've supported everything. You may not hear from everyone. Martin is always available. We try to give a summary. We're respectful of time. Look through the material. I didn't spend the time. We don't spend the time doing these maps, drafting up these legal briefs. They're important. That's part of the evidence that's submitted. Not how I argue whether something is a gap or not, but it's based on science. It's based on an engineer, not somebody arguing that, well, they don't have a gap. We have a gap.
You want to say something?
I plan to speak at the next meeting to address some of what's been said just now, but I do want to just address Mr. Rosen, is that your last name? Oh, when you were
Attorney
just-
Rosen.
What, sorry?
Attorney Rosen. Michael is fine as well.
When you were addressing the ZBA a moment ago, you referenced some technical information that you passed on to the ZBA.
For peer review.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay, and I don't know if that is something that we can review, because we haven't seen that. We've seen some other documents.
Let's clear that up for a second. The packets that you gave us, especially beginning and continuously, do those packets have the information that you're talking about?
No, they do not. Let me explain. So at the last meeting where you were not here, I believe that I walked to the table and I handed Mr. Wozniak.
Is that what you just showed me?
Because he had asked, as the member of your board that has engineering background, for the supporting engineering data. I believe, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, we might have emailed you a copy of it as well, but we printed a copy and brought a copy for Mr. Wozniak. And it's the data that went into the design of the tower.
Are you talking about the data that the engineering of the tower?
Correct. Yeah,
It's also used in the peer review.
And it was also used as part of the peer review. That is what I provided.
So I'm not sure you're received the peer review results. It was a pretty big, it was, all right, so can we send that out? So this is just factually true to the extent that these things have happened. I don't know the underpinnings of it, but we hired a peer review group. You know that because you've been paying attention. And they came in and said, all the things that the applicant is doing comply with all the standards that are required to build the cell towers in America. So I'm happy to give you that information, and you can, if you could come back and say that's not, even though they're making their representation, that information isn't true, that would be fine. But my sense is, again, that we have limited jurisdiction over telling them how they can build their tower, as long as the federal government has said that what they're doing, but that this is how you do it safely. Now, there are exceptions to that, and the board will get into that as we get closer to deliberation, but would that be helpful if you got that information?
We'd like to be able to have it.
Okay, so that will happen tomorrow, you'll get it sent to you.
Okay, Eric, if there's anything that you don't have that you need, just reach out to me and I'll send it to you.
So anybody else have questions? Are you done? Okay, all right, go ahead. Deb, you have questions?
I'm all set at this time.
All right.
Okay, I'd like to talk about what may be the elephant in the living room here, which is Starlink. Which is what? Starlink. Starlink is a cell option. Instead of building towers, they use satellites, and is currently in beta testing, but is actually only a few months away from being available for both text and voice. I believe in July of this year will be available for voice. And if that were available today, that would provide the cell coverage, as I understand it, it would provide the cell coverage that we're lacking and will be used not just in Greenfield, but in all kinds of remote areas where cell tower construction just isn't feasible. Now, I realize that T-Mobile is the one that's putting out the spectrum coverage, and it will be available to T-Mobile subscribers. FirstNet would not be using that because of the government contract with AT&T, but it would certainly be available to anybody, and it will be available at a cost, at a small fee, to anybody who wants to have that. Is AT&T planning to sign on to Starlink or a similar system that uses satellite coverage instead of building cell towers? And how will that affect this tower that is being proposed here?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, whether it's Starlink, the company or the technology, I don't think satellite's going to replace cell phone coverage. As far as I know, there's no plan for AT&T to contract with Starlink, and whether it's feasible or would replace cell phone coverage is yet to be seen. And at what cost is the significant determinant? I'd suggest it's not a small fee.
Not what?
It's not a small fee as you represent, as you stated, not that you.
I'm not being rude when I say what I'm about to say, but I think he just gave an opinion. He gave an opinion about what you think.
Well, that's what I was asked, because I don't know. We do have a contract with
Any of your
Starlink, but I'll-
engineers here or could come next week and testify to the satellite technology and what that means?
So Myron, are you available? Are you still there?
Yes, I am.
I was gonna go to 9.
Did you want to weigh in at all, or do you want to?
Yes, AT&T
sorry,
is working with AT&T. Yes, Martin Lavin, C Squared Systems on behalf of AT&T. AT&T is in development with AST, which is a satellite company. The service that is being offered by other carriers right now is only in beta test. It is only text right now. It's the footprint, it is intended, and I'm sure AT&T is working this way to use it to bring some service to extremely remote areas. Nothing that would ever do this, nothing that would ever have enough capacity to keep up with FirstNet requirements. The first responders of these satellites, I think, have a 10 to 15 mile radius footprint with one high frequency carrier that the phones will use. So you're talking about covering an entire metropolitan area with one channel, whereas the towers we have are loaded up with 10 or 12 different frequencies to serve an area 1% of that size. It's intended to bring some kind of communication for emergencies, to send a text, maybe to give your say I'm in trouble at this location, and hope it gets through. You're going to have wide open view of the sky, which is difficult when you're in a car or injured, perhaps. You have to be doing it just as the satellite's going over. It takes a long time for the text to go through. If it does go through, replies take a long time. And again, whereas we're talking about millions of bits per second, they're talking about hundreds. It's really only going to serve if you're out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, in a Yosemite or someplace that has no towers for 10 or 20 miles and never will allow any, for you to have basically an emergency possibility of being able to contact someone to express that you're in some sort of difficulty. There is no way in the foreseeable future, certainly, that this could ever substitute for FirstNet coverage or for first responders or for everyday cell phone use for all of our customers.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to, due to an important request of the chair, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Thank you. We all appreciate that.
Yes.
Won't go any further. 5 minutes, so. Let's, all right, so that's your question?
Yes.
Debbie, I have some questions.
I don't know if these are here this time.
Singles?
Yeah.
Are they single bathrooms?
There's 2 bathrooms.
I didn't know,
They're
right?
single. But, yeah.
You should know that.
Dash.
You open up the administrative.
Closing time.
Being a smart one, she only drank an inch of the soda.
I know, I've been milking it.
I finished it.
Yeah, I should.
Yeah, no, yep.
G, I don't, just so you know, so GSET is the local municipal internet service provider.
Picture?
Gentleman's closing and they want to make sure that they preserve some of their artifacts. And they couldn't find a home from it, so I said, it'll sit in our home.
GSET is the alternative. Passing.
Okay. So kind of Wi-Fi concept.
Yeah.
You still need power, you still at home.
Yeah. So GSET's the alternative.
Yeah,
copper
right down the
pass
street.
for
Yeah. This one is Meridian.
coax cable television service.
Street. They have a.
Montreal.
Must have been conceptual.
Cards are from, yeah. Yeah, Providence.
Providence.
Providence. Yeah.
It's not one. These are beer dryers.
Lawrence or Florence?
That is gonna be.
Pounding.
Don't tell the resemblance is still there.
Yeah. It's Italian, not yet at Florence. Well, now it is, not back then. Back then, Florence was it's just 70% Jewish.
I do too.
Yeah.
They used to have.
How are you?
Good.
Do you remember me from? You do?
Let's see if I can expand it. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Let me.
Pine Roller Control Station.
I know.
Yeah.
He showed up all through there.
Something.
I don't think he drove his father in mass.
My wife.
switch, yeah.
So.
Nobody else could get in.
We all fired, showed up the first night in Greenfield.
Kennedy was shot.
Me and my wife, here.
When 911 happened, you know.
Which was a good thing. Which was a good thing. Which was a good thing.
Everything got overwhelmed.
Carbon monoxide detector.
Oh, that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Guys?
No, you get covered.
See you.
It was interesting hearing you speak, because everything you talked about. So my son's in college, I'm not sure they had a fake shooter, but they all sheltered in place. And like the way, getting to see the way FirstNet worked, and getting to see how all that information got circulated quickly around the college
I don't-
campus.
We still have to allow
And I also-
opportunity for their
You're
expert
talking about
opinion.
September 11th.
And we work, so we're not gonna do any
Right.
deliberations, I don't think, until,
And,
until after.
for the special.
She wants to know if there's any deliberations, and I'm like, we're not
I
gonna.
was on the phone with the government. Later
I'm pretty
that
sure we're not gonna
day,
do deliberations. till
and
after.
somebody from Nextel, they can go arrangements with them, share the data. that
Might
he
be able to get
has.
started.
Yes, he was like one of the people that had
Yeah.
that kind of information.
he's
So
up
they
there.
were able to pull the data from his phone and all property information. So just wild at how much they borrowed in 20 cents.
Yeah, well, we learned the hard way what happens when a cell tower loses power.
Yeah. You missed our very first night, our first meeting, but I was explaining the coming home from college. My son's at Bucknell, so he was driving through the Poconos. And I told him to stay at school because it was snowing.
Hey, honey.
I told him to come home the next morning.
Oh my
So
God.
be here,
Break.
drive home.
Yeah, it'd be my year.
I don't think
It's been going too much longer, but
45 minutes from school, nothing else around, and he did a deal.
You're firing up.
Thank God it's for his homework.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone from people making phone calls, and guessing where they are. to when they call 911, and
You just know,
exactly where they
you
are.
can get there in a minute, yeah.
Well, he went into one, I don't know about the other.
Oh, yeah.
There's no television.
Remember, we had to drive all 20 miles to get cell service and find out.
We're not done, hey, I'll get.
The officers who responded to the incident on Homestead when there were a couple of individuals fleeing up 91. They ended up ditching the car back in that neighborhood. Yeah.
Gotta love those toys, huh?
Who's coming in next year?
So I don't know if folks noticed or realized, but during that.
I guess the lawyer's gonna speak and Dr. Chamberlain.
How long is
Trying to be.
Well, it has to be an hour.
But it was also, so it
I'll give
was
him-
like
I'll
call
give him
setup,
time to-
so like call setup was failing on FirstNet.
So we're just gonna have to suffer. I figure 9 is a good time to call it a day.
If
Yeah, so look at the clock right now.
as a user, it would take you 25, 30 seconds for a call to be made on FirstNet.
I'd be able to set up now, that it's on my phone.
I mean, I had to go too, but I figured. you know, I'm there.
So like, that was a call, that was a 7-year-old lady got cell coverage, you can get on the radio.
And so, which is all, which is great, which is all the reason to just.
Hey, I would say we have the opportunity.
Necessity.
You never know what.
You never know when the earth is. All right, Mike's in there.
It's like a.
Control and all that stuff. Anything.
And so that would be.
That was a good question.
So that would be an AT&T FirstNet data
Yeah.
cellular cellular
You've seen a lot here.
So-
A lot of changes.
Not that
How do you like
not that I
doing
know.
There wasn't just exactly like just come along the road.
Haven't done the tree on the heating.
Looks like you could have been a fight with me.
No, that would be. Well, I know that it's.
But being that you're using apps on your phone.
Everybody back?
Is on
You want to
FirstNet,
just knock on that last door and make sure no one's.
Justifies.
Full service.
the
You can see the door
necessity
knocking, yeah.
of FirstNet.
Yeah, open too. Everyone's back.
All right.
Like,
Stop here.
All right, at 21 of 9, we're resuming the meeting. So here's a couple of questions. Michael, you said least intrusive site before. you believe that that's a sort of a criteria for determining whether we should allow or not allow your application? Or are you saying that you're sensitive in your approach to this ahead of time, and so you come to us with the least intrusive site? Because I haven't read anything that says that we have to use that as a standard. Our standard is that, I mean, I'm not saying whether we will or we won't allow this, I'm not saying that so much, but my understanding is that we can't deny it if, we can't deny your application if it effectively prohibits the use,
Correct.
okay? And so that, the factors into that are, did they really, did they try with their other sites?
Correct.
But I never heard it said that way, least intrusive. So hypothetically, we could go to the fairgrounds. You could go to the fairgrounds. You could come running in here with a request for a variance and a special permit. Everybody in that neighborhood might be jumping up and down. for that. And we could say, based on the engineering, we could grant your variance and special permit, and you could have the tower there. So I just want to understand what you're saying. I know you've spoken in the context of talking to Peter, but I don't see that as a factor for us. That may be a factor for you in coming in here with this particular site, but if as we deliberate, I don't see that as a test unless you can point someplace.
For your board, I would defer to your bylaw. And I think it is your bylaw that governs what you're gonna do. And I think that's your primary criteria. So it's all of the factors in your bylaw. Then, I think secondarily, you probably should have the same analysis that I would have when I look at a site, which is what would happen if it got denied and got appealed. So I think the least intrusive criteria is a criteria that courts have referred to in discussing whether or not an appeal has valid claims in it when you're bringing them in front of a court. So in Peter's memorandum, he references least intrusive as the criteria that he would look at for why he might be able to win on an appeal is if we didn't show you that it's the least intrusive site. So I would answer Attorney Campanelli by arguing that I do believe it's the least intrusive site. And if I were in a courtroom, my argument would be, well, they rank the priority. So the community is telling me that a site in a residential district is, based on their ranking, more intrusive than a site in a commercial district. And so by the face of your bylaw, my argument would be, I'm going to start at your top criteria. And to me, that helps. But again, it's a combination of objective and subjective. So as part of the objective part of it, that you have a criteria ranking. So I look at your criteria ranking. Another criteria that I might look at in your special permit provisions are the two sections that were actually referenced earlier. 260 F8 and 9. So 9, one of them is can you minimize view shed and maximize screening? Well, so if this were one that we were debating, my argument would be, yeah, we minimize view and we maximize screening. We're putting it on a heavily wooded lot, 20 feet below the road. I would focus on your criteria. My arguments before you would be based on your criteria. If you ask me what factors I used my experience to help me determine that I think, in my opinion, this site meets those criteria, I'd start with your bylaw. I would always start with your bylaw. I would always think about your bylaw. But in the back of my mind, I would also think about what does 40A say and what does the Federal Telecommunication Act say.
Okay, and I have a question for you. Sure.
Can I piggyback on that just a smidge because
That was my
the court, well, Right, I think the board and the courts have warned that board should also run it through the Federal Telecommunications Act to make sure you're not violating. So as I said, I would run it through your ordinance. I think that's what the courts are requiring. I think that's what the First Circuit requires. That's the standard. There's also some FCC orders that you'll hear other people kind of ignore, but those are very important because if in fact it's denied and if in fact there's litigation, we don't want to pick fights. I've said that at the last hearing. We want to get approval. We want to provide service. Whether it's their tower or a tower across the street, we want to provide our customers with the best service we can. But the courts caution, or they've stated, a smart board would also run it through the Telecommunication Act standards. Make sure you don't violate those four. It's gotta be based on substantial evidence, not based on health or environmental effects. That it doesn't prohibit or effectively prohibit. It's the effective prohibition that you're talking about. That is
I was just
the
gonna
First
say, and you-
Circuit. So you'd run it through and say, is there substantial evidence to show a significant gap? And is this the, only feasible under the Cranston standard? Is it the only feasible location? Now, Cranston kind of warns that, look, this might be a back and forth. Hampton came up last time. We dealt with that with evidence, with facts, engineering facts. If there's another site, then, that's something that should be discussed, but it wouldn't comport with the ordinance is what I'm laying out there.
In other words, I think what you're saying is that if it's superficial just to say that's another site, unless you peel back the onion and understand what it would take to get that site approved in relation to how you're trying to get this site approved and what the factors are in this site. So if you have a set of factors in this site, you might grade it B+ getting a variance, and another site, which would be technically an alternative site, like the fairgrounds, continues as an example. You might rate that as a C- going forward, and therefore you would say, Michael used the word intrusive, but maybe the concept is this has a better likelihood of success, or this has a clearer path, or there's less mines, or whatever the standards that you, whatever the vocabulary you use. So you pick this spot because in looking at all the other spots, you graded them lower, even if they could provide similar service, or because this one has a lot more positive factors that the board could look at to grant you the permit, where the other ones, you would be fighting a battle that would have a less, in your mind, chance of success.
Correct. And I think the one twist to the variance standard, because I get the issue with the variance. It's a very difficult standard.
Issue of the safety
just meeting
the
general criteria of the variance, very difficult to achieve. But there's very clear mass case law on, having a hardship, which is a significant gap. So it kind of feathers, because it recognizes the state law and the state courts are recognizing a federal standard, I guess, to say this could, significant gap is one of those hardships. And if you go to the Whaling case and the Swansea case.
It's no different than solar and choice or lane. It's like at the end of the day, if you have a solar bylaw that precludes solar, whether someone needs a variance or doesn't need a variance, Tracer Lane says you have to give them their permits if your bylaw has the effect of prohibiting solar. And you said it best earlier when you said other than effective prohibition. And that.
So I'm going to turn to I'm going to move in a little bit of a different direction. More of a negotiating direction.
Thanks for go around.
When the balloon test, is it possible to lower the balloon at all to other heights at any time during the testing?
I don't know how they do it.
Is there like a guy somebody standing at the bottom, like Ben Franklin?
Yes. Who's doing it?
Dave Ashambo.
Dave Ashambo? We've done, I mean, if we just talk, I guess, you're paying him, so I don't want to.
Yeah.
They can float. What he can do is he'll put the balloon up and then he'll have ribbons or, something else that's visible so you can actually see some different heights. So
I would like
he
that.
should be able to accomplish it. I'm just trying to,
By putting maybe a ribbon or a flag on.
we
them.
do it all the time,
Okay.
either a second balloons are very difficult to do, but they'll do it so when you see photographs, you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, okay,
So you'll be able to see it at 170 and he could probably do it at 150 or something, but you just need to coordinate with David.
So I want to give you a chance to respond to how I look at this. I have a lot of concerns about the height of the tower with respect to safety. You've told us that there's you've told us that there's a design and engineering where the tower would collapse or break. I don't think, I've yet to see you, and I asked the question, it may have just passed by, but I've yet to see you produce any evidence that that engineering has actually worked in real time. I mean, maybe you can, maybe you can't. If you can, that would be helpful, but if you can't, then that leaves open a question.
So can I ask a question?
Well, you can, but just because, my thoughts roam, and if you ask a question, ask my wife, I'll forget exactly what I was saying. So, so I'm thinking that, reducing the tower size is an important piece in this process. And the way I'm seeing this is that there's the FirstNet service, which can be at some point on a tower at some height. And I don't know what that height is. And you've kind of gone from 170 down, telling us how you're going to lose customer base, or you're going to lose something. There's a loss occurring. But from 166 to 146, as an example, I mean, I would actually like to go lower than that, but just to give it as an example, you're losing 13%, which in my mind is not so significant, but I want to give you a chance to talk about that. And why do you need, if it can work at 130 or 40 feet for the part that the fire chief is concerned about, why do we need the extra 40 feet? Why do we need the extra 30 feet? What part is that? And there's a cynical part of me, I must admit, that's like, well, that's for AT&T because they're not going to make the investment unless they can get all the money they can out of it. So they're coming in with their best shot. This is what we want. Over 170 has problems. So 170 and plus, how far can we push this over the variance issue? But there is a gap between the fact that there's an emergency service need, which I believe can come at a lower height. It's based on what you're presenting us. And then the idea that if we go up to 170 feet, that's for your benefit, which is something I want to consider seriously as I deliberate. And I want the board to consider seriously as we deliberate, because that goes back to the circling back to these federal statute. If I started the variance and we want to get strong about the criteria for the variance, and you can build a tower at 130 feet, not 170 feet, then that's a different story than if you have to build a tower at 170 feet, because we're not prohibiting service if we're giving you a chance to go at a lower height. Even though you need a variance for the lower height, maybe that tower falls on the right of way technically, but it doesn't fall all the way across the road. And so I'm laying some of my cards on the table because we're getting closer to the end, and I'm beginning to understand things, and I'm letting the board understand the law through our communications, nothing more than just letting them know what the cases say. And so I need to hear, I mean, I know you're gonna, I'd rather you didn't advocate, but because I want an honest answer from you about it, and so that's it.
It's fairly straightforward.
Okay.
So the first thing is, if you just look at a single carrier tower, so let's just say it's AT&T. So the goal is to fill a coverage gap, not fill 80% of a coverage gap. So that's the first concern, is if you're not filling the coverage gap, you are still effectively
Be more
prohibiting.
specific. about that?
Sure, I mean, we can get the data on what a lower pole does and how much of the coverage gap is still there. The second point is that may require the need for a second tower. So I would think that one of the things your bylaw, and as I read your bylaw in its totality, you want to minimize the number of towers that you have in the community. So having to build a second tower means that we could be back here in a year in another area where there are other citizens that have, I don't want to look at it, I don't want it in my neighborhood, I don't want this, I don't want, so it would potentially mean that there would need an additional tower. And the third third factor is your bylaw promotes and actually requires co-location. So if we build it at the lowest height possible, and we only put one carrier on it that might not get all of their coverage, you're inviting either a second tower somewhere else, or maybe even a third or a fourth or a fifth tower if another carrier comes in and can't fit on that pole. The last thing we want to do is build a tower and then have to take it down and use a different pole and a different technology and a different structure to build something that's going to hold 2 or 3 carriers 2 years from now or 3 years from now, when we're going to be out there spending 7 figures to build a tower. We want to build a tower that's going to provide you with the opportunity when Verizon or T-Mobile comes in a year and says, hey, we want to put a tower on the fairground. You're going to say, well, why doesn't the tower that Veridi built work for you? And you need to go look at the Veridi tower first before you come back to us. Just like we had to start and look at that radio tower that had the issues with it, but we started there. And so I think the theory is when we balance all of those things, and again, starting with your own bylaw, your bylaw advocates co-location. And so we're trying to satisfy that need. And that, at the end of the day, will potentially mean that you have 1 tower instead of 2 or 3 or 4 somewhere down the future.
Okay.
So,
What's the issue with the fall zone? Because I have difficulty with that. I do these all the time. We don't even put breakpoints in some of them. I mean, if you go and look at the Florida circumstance when hurricanes hit, I mean, talk to you.
Well, I was going to actually, if I can cut you off for 1 second, the question I was going to ask you when you said don't ask the question because my wife will tell you I'm going to forget, and I almost forgot. So the second thing I was going to say is we may not be able to show you one that successfully snapped at the break point. What we may be able to successfully show you is these just don't fall down. And I think that's going to be the more probable is I don't think you're going to have a monopole that has a break point that falls down that doesn't break. I mean, these things are built to withstand what, 170 mile an hour.
If you look at what happens in Florida from hurricanes, and talk to you hired a peer review engineer, talk to TEP, talk to TEP, pick up the phone and talk to them and say,
or ask them to come to the next meeting.
What happens? So all of the weight is in the antennas. That's what creates the resistance for the pole. Pole's steel, it can be designed, over-designed. They put breakpoints in. The biggest pushback I get when I ask for a breakpoint in the tower, why do you need it? We designed them not to fail. They don't tip over. So the idea that we're arguing over something beyond all of us, it'll meet the code. If you look at, I've been to enough of these hearings and listening to structural engineers, all the antennas are all up at the top. That's where the wind loads are. So when the hurricanes hit in Florida, the wind loads push the tower over, they bend over, and then the steel hardens. TEP, this is what you hear. So they just kind of like lay there. So the antennas just make the tower buckle. Now, if they put in a break point, which is what we try to do to satisfy concerns, it's going to snap there. So talk to TEP about that. Don't take my word for it. Talk to them about it. What is this technology? The towers aren't going to snap at the base if they put that fail-safe in. So from our perspective and our engineers, we have difficulty with put in the break point. No, we designed it. We designed the foundation specifically to deal with wet. We designed it specifically. It might be a mat foundation, which is just like a big square that they bury. I mean, these foundations are huge, or a caisson where they go deep and they pour, cement truck after cement truck worth of cement. So talk to TEP then, please. Because it should not be a concern if it meets the code. Why you have a fall zone like that in the ordinances, I don't know.
There's a lot of communities that have these fall zones.
They do. You know what most of them are for? To keep them away from residences. And in this instance, the unique thing about this is we're next to a highway. And the only thing, even if the pole fell, the worst case is it falls onto the roadway. Now, do you go down the highway? Do you see any monopoles out there? I see them everywhere.
I do.
Well, same situation. I mean, the federal government, the state government is allowing towers right on the median strip.
I guess. From this side of the table,
Yeah.
my job is to make everything that happens as safe as possible. I talked to the peer review guy and he could not tell me that the break point was as safe as the fall zone. He wouldn't do it. He said, fall zone is the safest bet. Falls, it's gonna fall. And it's gonna fall down the height of the tower. You can be guaranteed it's not going anywhere else. So so I have a concern. I just want to leave it at that. We're not deliberating, but I have that concern. So having that concern, which I'd like, of course, again, not being facetious, I'd like you to take seriously. Tell me about 130 feet and 140 feet.
Yeah, I think it starts to get too, it gets too low to point. So why would anybody invest in something that gets you 90% there? I mean, these aren't free. You know, there is huge expense here. These are everything's six figures. So there's nothing cheaper than that. You know, AT&T is interested in providing maximum coverage. So when you say 13% is not bad, it's a big deal for us because on both sides of that tower, you know, if you think about this, and I'm going to advocate a little bit here, but
That's right.
if you think of it like a jigsaw puzzle that I put in my memo, it's like a honeycomb. So we create these blobs of coverage that aren't perfect because terrain, it, you know, hits trees and all this crazy stuff. But if we have all these asymmetrical circles that all overlap a little bit, when you move one, it starts shifting all the others around. So you don't give us 13% here, somewhere on the periphery to the north, we're going to be short and need another site. Eventually, think about the entire United States, we're building hundreds of thousands of sites because you didn't think 10% was a big deal. It is a big deal. Now, is there somewhere that it's not going to make a tremendous amount of difference? I think we could have that discussion, but it's not going to be 30 feet.
Want another question to give you time to think?
You have a question? Go ahead, yeah.
One of the things I noticed in reading the cases, the case law, was that many of them specified no lights. Are you planning to put lights on the towers? And if so, why?
Is that a federal requirement on the height?
It is federal requirement on the height.
Do we need it on this tower?
I don't believe we do.
I don't think we did. I don't think we're in a flight path anymore.
Oh, I am.
But but they can't be prohibited. So you can't say you can't build a tower because it needs a light because the light is a safety function for the FAA. So
I understand that, but I thought it was curious.
I don't believe this one has to be lit, but that's a question that
Almost every case, I think I didn't read all the cases, but the ones I read all specified no lights. So I was a little surprised.
I'd be surprised.
We'll confirm. I don't think we need it. There's not an airport in the flight path.
There's one in Turner's Falls, but that wouldn't be in the flight path.
I don't notice the lights around when I drive, but here's my question. So there's been, so the credibility of your data is being questioned by the concerned citizens. All right, wait.
Right.
I'm not saying that.
I'm
not saying that as a rhetorical statement.
Okay.
We have no way, unless we were to hire an expert, which we have not done, of knowing whether you're telling us stuff that we should be really paying attention to, or you're telling us stuff that's self-serving. So how do we know the credibility of your data as compared to what they're asking you to do?
So I'll address the elephant in the room right now because I know that John is still on and he's heard me say this before. We will not provide drop call data. We consider it confidential. It's a business issue. It's proprietary. Attorneys can argue to the contrary. AT&T is not going to provide it. We've not been asked for anything else. We answer to you. We come and we present our information to you. We don't respond to everything people raise. I mean, people are gonna say that, well, the tower should be invisible. Well, we can't do that. We're not gonna respond
So
to
if
that.
I ask you for the drop call data, what are you gonna tell me?
We're not gonna give it to you. We won't give it to you. We don't give it to any board that asks for it. So the drop call data affects we're also competitors. You know, we compete with Verizon, we compete with T-Mobile, we compete with Dish. AT&T considers it proprietary, confidential, it's not gonna happen. Now, if there's some, you didn't request a peer review. Again, we submit, there's no reason to doubt C squared. Look into what C squared does. They're reputable. They're not AT&T. AT&T gives them all of the network information. They
Not
put
the
it,
man who was speaking.
that's Martin Lavin, ML.
All right, so you're saying that you go to them and say, we're hands off on what you're doing.
No. AT&T retains them
Right,
to prepare the report.
in your best interests or in the context of they're independently assessing stuff and you're taking the information?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they were independently assessing. They're taking the information and basing it on engineering. So it gets a little dicey when you say, well, and this is what we hear from the abutters, owners, whatever you're calling them.
Concerned citizens.
Concerned citizens. Well, we hear from the concerned citizens that it's all bogus. Martin Lavin is a well-respected engineer, works for C squared. And frankly, that's insulting. So.
I get
that.
That's not what I'm saying.
Look at his qualifications, you look at the reputation of C squared. We weren't asked. You didn't hire a peer review person for it. You didn't, that's not something that was done. Again, we answer to the board. I'm not answering to Mr. Campanelli if, he says, well, your coverage maps, on the FCC website are different. But look at the whole website instead. I'm not gonna argue. He's presenting argument, not
I guess
evidence.
what I'm saying to you is that we do have the right, even without a peer review, to determine the credibility of what you're giving us. Nobody here is under oath. It's not like a place where I can put people on the spot, cross-examine them. So I have to rely on your information as being credible.
Yep.
So they're trying to tell us that maybe it's not. So I'm not saying that it is. So we went through this process with you, giving you a lot of time to make your presentations, because we wanted you to have a chance to do it. We also had to come up to speed to learn what this was all about. And so for me, it's a question. It's not it's more like, so I'm going to then, when we deliberate, have to raise the question of, am I going to rely on your information as the source of the data that we need to determine that, yes, there is a significant gap in coverage? I never knew until I heard from others that there was another way of analyzing this, which is the drop calls data, which you're now telling me is data that you collect. It's not like and I guess somebody could actually drive around and do it themselves, right? Maybe they can't, because you provide the service and you get to keep the information.
And you gotta be, it's in car versus in building, there's way more factors than just getting in a car and driving around. But let me offer a
You understand what
suggestion.
I'm saying?
100%.
Okay.
So-
I don't mean it as an insult to anybody, Martin. I'm not insulting
Look,
you.
Martin's easy to get along with.
I am the one that said it earlier. At the end of the day, I'm painting the picture. There are people that have the facts, and the people that have the facts prepared reports for you. You have to assess whether or not the facts in the report that they prepared for you are credible or not credible. When it came to structural, you got a peer review, and the peer review reviewed it and gave you his opinion. You didn't ask for a peer review with regard to
Actually, I thought the peer review was actually gonna do everything. So when I did find out, it was just the structure
But
of the thing that I was.
Let me make the following suggestion. At a minimum, we should get you Martin's criteria. We should get you his resume. You should understand his training, his background, his area of expertise, a list of representative communities that he has provided evidence in front of, or maybe even been a peer consultant in another community, so that you know that this isn't just somebody that we went and said, hey, like, as you said, how do I test the credibility?
No, I would rather, I'm gonna assume his credibility, I'm gonna assume his credentials are fine.
Okay.
That's not my issue with his credentials. My issue is I want him to explain deeper how he gets from point A, which is you're supposed to find this out for us, to point Z, which is, this is what I found out. I'm drawing green here and this there and white here and everything else. What did I do to get there?
So Martin, unmute for a second.
But, okay.
Martin, you hear all of this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you will speak early on the next hearing that we're speaking at, which is in May, okay?
Certainly.
Thank you.
More than happy to.
So the question is, how did you, I want to dig deeper into how you came to the conclusions that you came to.
No
And I'd
problem.
like you to, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, did you say no problem or no problem?
No problem.
No problem. Okay.
All right. Is the board okay with all that?
Yes.
That work for everybody?
Yes, I just wanted one comment. You know, in regards to, you know, I understand the law, I understand we need to follow our, you know, go through everything, the variances, I understand all that. I guess I do, you know, there's a lot of talk about facts and things, but I guess I just want to remind everybody that, you know, this is not just, I've checked all the boxes. This is just about, I've checked off all the boxes I'm allowed, you wouldn't be before the board. So I don't want to lose track of, you know, there's the objective, but there is the subjective, and, you know, your opinions and your experience, and everything, you know, I respect that 100%. But you're making, you know, you've made your decisions based on those experiences, and we're going to make our decisions in regards to our experiences and the community, so.
All we ask is that you make your decisions based on your ordinance and what the law is, so that, you know, the special permit criteria, we've explained how we satisfy that, we've explained how we satisfy the variance, notwithstanding the difficulties with it, but that we're following the rules at the same time. That's how we should.
I think one other factor, which is, with certainly no disrespect intended, you have one cell tower that you permitted 20 years ago. So your experiences
One
are,
at the country club?
yeah.
We didn't, that, our ordinance is post.
Oh, so that, okay, so then you have one that you haven't.
We have none. This is our first.
So you have none. And so I would hope that you find our experiences and our explanation of them credible to the board, because you have not had the benefit of being out in the.
Oh,
real world. Okay.
absolutely. I mean, and I start, you know, this has been a great education. I've learned a lot about things I wasn't sure I ever really wanted to learn about. One of the reasons why I like being on the board. But I guess I just wanted to make sure, you know, it is not just a matter of saying I've checked all the boxes. It's, you know, we're good to go.
Agreed 100%.
So
I think that's.
what you might consider, like, I guess I just wanted, the reason why I'm saying that, my intent here is saying, what you might have dismissed and not considered based on your experiences might be something that we would consider on our end.
The best way I can explain to you that I think that your considerations matter to me is we have rigid time deadlines, and we would have the right to come in here and say, no, we want our decision, or we're going to go to federal court. And that's not what we're doing. We've extended times, we've given written waivers, we allowed the community group to speak. We've invited them to speak at our last meeting, at this meeting. We're going to let them do the whole full presentation before we come back for, hopefully, knock on wood, one last meeting after that. We want you to hear everything from everybody. In an ideal world, we believe that you will agree with our position on this, and our hope is that you do. But I have found in my years of doing it that the best way to do that is to give you the time and the information that you need to make those decisions. And I think in a respectful way, and again, the board's been great. I appreciate the respectfulness of the board. You ask great questions, and I'm not sitting here out of my fist and saying no to any of it. I think you need the time and the information you need to make the right decision. I hope we've given you that. I hope we're continuing to give you that. You know, doing the second balloon test. we're happy to do it because there were things that you have raised and explained to us why you have these levels of concern.
Good question. We're gonna get a presentation next week about coverage. I'm sure in detail. But assuming we pay them.
You mean it covered from the concerned citizens?
Yeah, from their expert, okay, now whether he does it or not, that's not maybe an issue, but you're gonna be here, I would assume, ML will be here. It'd be nice for him to hear what they say and come back and say, okay, I've heard that, based on my expertise, here's my responses to that.
That is exactly what our plan is to do, is the reason that we were allowing them to do that is, and we are not gonna bring our experts next week. They're all gonna watch it on Zoom the next day. And they're gonna sit down when they have the time to watch it. And when we come back in May, that way we're not interrupting Chamberlain or Campanelli. The floor is theirs, the meeting is theirs, with now one small caveat, which is if we do the balloon test first, and you want to ask us any questions about the balloon test, if we don't get it done this weekend, we're happy to answer those. But our goal at the next meeting next Thursday is it's their presentation.
Isn't Martin gonna start the meeting telling us how he peeled away the onion or no?
I was gonna have him do it on the 9th, on May 9th.
He said he'd do it in May.
I wanted him to have the opportunity to hear what Attorney Campanelli and Mr. Chamberlain had to say as well. Because I think it would be less beneficial to you if he has to speak next week and then again 2 weeks later. So this way he can give you one presentation based on the concerns you've raised tonight and any additional information he hears next week. And we would start off the next meeting with Marlon, our next meeting.
One other request, if you could, and you both have spoken to it today, if you could take the various sites, because you ruled out Hampton and you ruled out the Fair, you think based on our ordinance, here's the criteria. If you could, I'm looking for a tremendous effort to say, okay, here's how you, with your expertise, how you went through the process to get to this site, and how you ruled out those. Sure. And make a comment that we couldn't put a tower on the Hampton structure, it's not capable, it have falls on, just some brief bullet items to allay my. Sure. Yeah, my analness about saying, how do we go from these sites and narrow it down to one, okay? That would provide a level of detail. That'd be much more. Now I'm not looking for dissertations, just the things you spoke to. Road.
So by way of example, so on Hampton Inn, we read their special permit. So they don't have enough parking. They have parking on the adjoining lot. They would have to shut down part of the Hampton Inn in order for us to be able to build it anywhere other than their roof. Boom, that was criteria. So we're putting it on their roof. It's gonna be 64 feet high. Yeah, I can do that for you for each site.
I'm not looking for a huge amount of detail, but just enough to feel comfortable that here's how we got to this site. Yep. Bullet points. Yeah.
And you spoke of, you said, well, I won't go down 30 feet, but I could go down some. I'd like the flag to be on the spot that you feel comfortable with.
I'll talk to AT&T and see if there's a compromise.
See this, yeah, so this is the conundrum is that we all want cell service except if we live in the neighborhood.
But this is why we're here, because you want cell
Well,
service.
no, hang on. There's somebody who
Yeah,
lives
but
in the
I'm just
neighborhood
saying,
that wants
I'm
cell
just saying that-
service.
But yeah.
Why would?
Well, thank you.
I'd say
Neighborhood,
I'd say-
mine doesn't work either.
I wouldn't say want, I'd say need.
Need, even better.
There's no desire.
Can I reverse that question though? So you have, how many people have signed this thing?
22.
22. So you have 22 people that are trying to block this from happening. And my guess is we have a couple thousand, few thousand within the vicinity. Now, you know, they're the silent majority without question. So they're not going to come to a hearing. It's, well, they'll just take care of it. We have 21 people all in a concentrated area. And I think the balloon test will be instructive. I mean, I think it'll be helpful for the board. And maybe that is what drives the height issue a little bit.
But one of the standards is the character of the neighborhood. It's not my neighborhood, then I'm not gonna come and complain about the character of somebody else's neighborhood. If it's in my neighborhood, I'm gonna come and complain about the character of my neighborhood. So that's why you.
But
get
nobody
the
on your
local-
street would have electricity if that would be.
Well, hang on.
That's, I don't want, that's
So-
not what I'm saying. Listen, philosophically, we can have a beer and talk about that stuff, but I'm just saying in terms, so. There are some people in this community that think that it might be okay to have 25 cell towers that are 100 feet tall that get hidden by the trees, and that's how you provide service, because then we're not looking at these ugly behemoths. So, you know, that's not your economic model.
Well, it's not your bylaw. When we start,
Yeah, but that's a subjective standard, like what, you know, my point is just that I've got to overcome, the board has to overcome that reaction that everyone has, that they don't want that to be in their neighborhood. I'm glad there are neighbors that appreciate it and think that they need it, and they're not offended by the height or the look of it. But I think it's our duty to really explore the whole thing, and I'm letting you know that that's how we're gonna do it. This isn't gonna be like a 5-minute thing when we finally deliberate. And the more you can be sensitive in your advocacy, the better it will be for both of us in terms of getting to the finish line.
I do think, again, respectfully, that when we go look at the balloon, you will also have an opportunity to look at the neighborhood. And
I can't disagree with you.
When you think about the characteristic with the self-storage and the tractor supply and some of the other, the highway immediately there. Again, it is the delicate balance between subjective and objective.
But we're gonna absorb the locals' wants and needs, and I think that's what Debbie's saying. We're gonna absorb their wants and needs in how we deliberate. And that's part of our job. I know the law is important, and we'll ultimately get to the law when we finally get to the end of the day. But we sit in this community paying strong attention to what the neighbors and the abutters think about stuff that comes from them. And if there's resistance, then we listen to it, we try to honor it, we try to understand it. Doesn't mean we're gonna decide for or against anybody, but so I'm hoping, and one of the reasons for the balloon test, again, I know you represented that you're kind of doing it like as something that we asked for, but I think in essence, the balloon test is a really critical piece for you as well, because it's really seeing the sucker that makes it work. Just like a judge going to a site visit. You can explain the site 1,000 times, but the judge isn't gonna know it. So let's use the balloon test as a really good opportunity to have reality in front of us and to see afterwards what people say and how we, but I agree with you, the balloon test needs to happen before their presentation, because I would like, it would make, then it would put it in the best context for all of us.
To come right from there next, well, knock on wood, maybe we'll get it done this weekend, but if we don't.
Yeah, well,
to
before
come
next
right-
meeting is my point.
So
It's
if
either
we
gonna
came
be-
from there next
Right.
Thursday and came right here.
Yeah.
I actually think it's fresh in everybody's mind. Everyone's just walked off the site. Hopefully it means we got a nice sunny day. We got to spend a little bit of time outdoors and look at it. And I do think, again, knock on wood, maybe we'll get it done this weekend, but if not, then
Okay,
next Thursday.
so unless there's any other,
One final question, just procedurally. We've talked a lot, you know, I'm assuming in May, we're gonna make the decision on the variance and the special permit.
yes.
Have we covered, we talked a lot about the variance, but I heard one of these public speak earlier about a bunch of things that have to do with the special permit. Have we, in all these deliberations, kind of gone through all the things that we would want to talk about for a special permit?
No, that's the next thing to focus on. I think my goal for all of us was to understand the federal law.
Yeah.
Because whatever we do here, it all circles back to the federal law. And if whatever we're doing in our ignorance is prohibiting cell service, then we're just running in place. So I want to make sure we understand what's behind us, the monster that's leaning over us, telling us what we have to do in relation to our own ordinance and how we analyze it, because that's what we're first going to do, is this. And we know how to do this because this is our ordinance.
Yeah.
But the federal law is something that's new to us. We're not usually integrated with federal law, nor are we used to the federal government, we're used to state government trying to do it, but not the federal government coming in and telling us that whether you like it or not, there are things you have to do, whether you like it or not. So,
But I'm just talking selfishly. Time wise for the meetings, they want to be done in May. We just finished, but we spent 3 hours today, you know. And we're gonna have a presentation next week from the experts.
on the 9th, we will begin to go over our stuff. We'll begin to
I think we
deliberate
should-
on that.
Yeah, and I think we need to spend whatever time it takes to finish. And I don't think that's gonna be quick.
No, it's
Okay.
not.
All right, so I just,
So you saying that we should have a big meeting?
well, I mean, I don't know about them, but I think that, you know, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think your intention would be done.
We by agreement, we have to be done by May 3rd.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe we can have a third meeting in May if we feel we can't do 2.
Yeah.
I think there's enough time. I think I've been asked repeatedly for the concerned citizens to have their opportunity. By the end of April, that'll be the case. We'll have a good 2 weeks for us to digest, to start looking at our own ordinances on the 9th. We're gonna want to make a rebuttal. We're gonna hear from Martin. Then we're gonna start to talk about all the different things because we'll have all the facts hopefully in front of us.
I agree with you. I think that having the opportunity to do the balloon test next week, to hear their presentation, and then not having a meeting again for almost 3 weeks. I've been taking obviously copious notes. It will be our goal to cover everything that has been raised, including what gets raised next week on the 9th. If there's so much raised on the 9th that I don't think that we're gonna be capable, I'm sorry, if there's so much raised on the 17th that I don't think we're gonna be capable of getting it done on the 9th, I will be letting Mr. Singer, Mr. Twara know that we think we might need more time, and that would be up to your board to decide. But my goal is finish it on the 9th, and then that gives you also an entire session to deliberate. And if I get it done even sooner than that on the 9th, you could start your deliberations on the 9th.
There was one public person's written comment. I don't really, wasn't listening to her carefully, but she had a whole litany of things.
Yeah.
In the order, so you could just.
260 F, sections 8 and 9. She read the section, she gave the list of things, and I
It's
already
in the
wrote-
special permit section.
I already wrote down my responses. Yep.
Okay, I think we know how to do special permit. Whose hand's up, John? John, is your hand up by accident or you want to speak? John? He's probably having dinner. All right. I'm gonna.
I'm here. I apologize. I just had to find the window again. No, I just, obviously I don't know if the applicant is up to 5 hours now, but I just wanted to, I know we're wrapping up the meeting, but just for something the board.
Go ahead. I'm just gonna say something afterwards. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. If that was Ed. So just something to think about, between now and Thursday would be Ed's, description of the drop call data as a trade secret in terms of Verizon or whatever. But I would also characterize it as a trade secret, to planning boards around the country, because essentially the main reason I would assert that they can't share drop call data or won't share it, even though they are required to share it with the FCC, who doesn't accept propagation maps as proof. And I can send you a link about that. But the main reason is if Ed shared drop call data with you, every, he's, on his way the next day to another town, and there'd be no justification for saying, I can't share the drop call data with you. And essentially that would cut into AT&T's business significantly. So that's what I would, just something to think about in terms of not being willing to share the drop call data. And I would definitely encourage, given that no one is going to share the drop call data, everyone, obviously can do their own test and just drive around with their cell phone and see if the call drops. And our experience is that it doesn't. Thanks.
What I was gonna say, John, and I hope everybody, I don't think there's many people listening, but we can give the applicant 4 years to make their presentation. And it doesn't mean that the concerned citizens get 4 years of time in rebuttal. It's their application. They've agreed to go this long. They've agreed to talk this long. I'm gonna give them another 3 hours on the 9th. I'm gonna give them as much time as they need to answer our questions and to have us be satisfied that their application has been completed. The concerned citizens are being given an opportunity to speak. If there's something relevant that needs to be spoken about, I'm happy to listen to it, but the idea that you get 5 hours of time because they've gotten 5 hours of time, I'm tired of hearing it, so I don't want to hear it again.
Oh, yeah, I
Please.
definitely wasn't suggesting that, and I
You
apologize. It seemed like
You
that.
were,
too.
no, you were. And I've heard it over and over again from the concerned citizens, and I'm tired of hearing it. If you have something to say, I'll give you 100 years to say it, but it's not a tit for tat. They are the applicant. They're the ones who are coming before us. They're the ones who are spending the money. They're the ones who are presenting and asking us to say yes or no. And the concerned citizens have a right to speak to it, but it's not a tit for tat. So please stop with that. Thank you.
Dave's been a long night, shall we?
Yes. All right, so can we make a motion to close the hearing at this point?
I'll make.
So you don't want to close it, you want to make a motion to continue to April 17th.
Okay, I'll read, make the motion, we continue to April 17th.
Second. Okay, any discussion?
For both
the variance and special.
Yes, for both.
Yes.
Any discussion? No. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show that it's unanimous. Thank you.
I'll make a motion, meeting be adjourned.
No, we have minutes.
So just real briefly, so we will either see you at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning or 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, or the balloon will be going up at 2 o'clock on Thursday, and we'll see you at the site at
Let's
5:30.
communicate,
Right.
whenever you're ready to make a decision, let Eric and David know, and then we'll go out to everybody to let them know what it's.
Okay.
What time would the balloon go?
If we did it on Thursday,
Thursday.
we would put it up at 2,
2.
and we would keep it up until we finish and go to the
Meeting after.
the meeting.
Would that be 6 o'clock?
It might be 6:30 or 6:45, because, so we're gonna be there at 5:30, so that we can.
Could be fixed, right?
4 hours.
Again, we want to be respectful of anybody that's working and might need a little.
Well, it's gonna work out. Believe me, everybody, we've done enough. I mean, we've done enough. There was, we gave everybody time tonight, and we ended up where we were back to speaking with you because that's how many people showed up to do it. So I'm tired of that whole piece of it.
Understood.
But we.
Yeah, but I will have to arrange my time off of work to be there, so.
Even at 5:30?
Well, 5:30, I thought we were talking about, meeting earlier. No,
No,
5:30.
we're
I
not
can
meeting
do.
at 5:30.
5:30 I can
You
do.
come at 5:30
I
to
can
the
come at
site.
5:30, no problem.
5:30 at the site, and then if we have to go to
But the
Elena's.
neighbors can sit from 2 to 5:30 and do their own assessing, or board members who can go drive around and do
I
that.
thought we were meeting at 2.
Yeah, just have George. So, again,
Bring me a black coffee.
we're gonna meet at 5:30 as a board. They're gonna look at the site, and then to the extent they want to drive to Elena's front yard or somebody else's front yard or backyard and take a look. And then we're gonna tell David he can take it down. If somebody is delayed at work and we need to make sure that they have enough time. So I think he'd tell David estimated 6:30 we're wrapping. But I want to make sure that each of the board members has a chance to go to any other house and look and see.
Okay.
Right?
David, we got.
So
Yes.
Is Saturday off then?
No.
It's not
It's gonna rain, so we want to now, while we're all together, pick the alternative rather
got it.
than he and I using up a lot of his valuable time.
Yeah.
And
to
then
decide
David
whether-
having to
Right.
track everybody else
So
down
we
at least.
agreed on next Thursday, if that's our plan B.
It's our,
Plan A is Saturday, that's our plan C. Plan A is Saturday, plan B is Sunday, plan C is Thursday. And we feel confident that Thursday will be weatherproof, so we're gonna get it done. And our main objective is to get it done before the meeting next Thursday, so we can all be in the same place when we hear from the heavy hitters for the concerned citizens. And Martin can listen to everything. So we're on track.
Time on Saturday would be 10.
10 on Saturday or 10 on Sunday, same as last week. Okay, thank you.
You're doing
Thank
minutes.
you all.
we're doing minutes. Yep.
Thank you. You're doing minutes. We're good. Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
George, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I may hear a motion to approve minutes of the March 20th. Is it March 20th? February 20th? Oh, March 20th.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the March 20th.
I second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Record shows unanimous. I hear a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show is unanimous. Meeting is adjourned.